Okay, welcome everybody to Vintage Talking Vikings History. Today, some people don't know this. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. I don't know. If you're young and you think the Vikings history starts in 1990, you may not know this. But the Vikings have been to four Super Bowls. They didn't win any of them, but they have been to four Super Bowls. So tonight, that is what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the four Super Bowls.
Vikings, let's win this game. Score Vikings, another name. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run out the score. You hear us yell for more. V-I-K-I-N-G-S. Score Vikings, let's go.
I love our intro.
I do like it.
So I actually met. She didn't. I cannot. Before we talk about Super Bowls, this is kind of relevant because I read it to a lady today. Well, to my wife to the eye doctor. I cannot. She did not give me her name. I wish she would have.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, I live in San Antonio, so we all know this is where Tommy Kramer's from.
Mm-hmm.
I ran into this old lady today, and she said that she used to play ball in the street with Tommy Kramer.
Oh, jeez.
And she says that she taught Tommy Kramer everything he knows about throwing the football. So
Really?
I cannot remember her name. I wish she would give me her name, but Tommy, if you see this, let me know if it's true. Because she says that he admits it all the time.
Oh, jeez.
So, she had nothing but good things to say about Tommy, which I believe.
He is a good guy. He's just
Yeah.
he's just a he's a party guy.
Yeah.
Even to this day, he's still a party guy.
Aren't we all?
But he's a good guy. I've never heard
Yeah.
anything derogatory about him or anything else. He he lives life. That's it.
He loves Minnesota. He loves the
Yeah,
Vikings.
I guess he lives up here permanently now.
His last divorce, his wife got the house in San Antonio.
Oh, what? Okay, because he originally married a girl from, I was friends with her family. He married a girl from like Oakdale, Minnesota, and he has a daughter.
Right.
And I was kind of like, okay, so did he get married after her, or is this the same woman?
Yeah, he must have, because the lady still lives on the same street in the house. She knows she's still neighbors with Tommy and everything.
Wow,
like
so
that.
she got the house and everything.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my God.
he comes down to San Antonio every once in a while to visit his family and stuff like that. But
Yeah, he lives up here, and matter of fact, Jim McMahon's up here, I think this weekend or was past weekend, whatever. And he has his little get-togethers. They go to bars and watch the games and all that stuff. And he kind of does the autograph thing. So I think that's how he gets money. I didn't know he lost his house in the divorce though.
Yeah, because I'm like, isn't he from? Yeah, but so those of you who so let's get into it. So quote unquote 1970, but the quote unquote the 1969 season, the last year before the AFL NFL merger. So the Vikings do have credit for winning the last NFL championship.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
So they are the last team to win an NFL championship. As far as the NFL, the original NFL league, they are the last team to win it before the merger.
Yep.
So Super Bowl IV, which would be the first Super Bowl that the Vikings were in, it was 23-7. It was 16-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
And then the Vikings scored to make it 16-7, and then the Chiefs scored again, and that was it. The Chiefs weren't even the best team in the AFL in the regular season that year.
No, it was, I believe, the Raiders.
Yeah, the Raiders had the best record. I think the Raiders were the number one seed.
Yeah. The Chiefs were the wild card team.
Yeah.
They beat the Jets in New York in the divisional round, and then they beat the Raiders in the AFL championship. So that's how they ended up playing. That's how they got to the Super Bowl. Their second one in 4 years because they lost the first one to the Packers.
Yeah. So they kind of had the experience in that. They kind of proved out in that game.
Well, and also with that game, the Vikings went in. The Vikings were 2 touchdown favorites. The Vikings were 13.5-point favorites in that game, mostly because of the defense, the front four, and Joe Cap. And they were heavy favorites in that game. Heavy favorites. And the Chiefs came out. They kind of had this. The Chiefs came out with this flex offense, flex kind of wishbone type offense. They had the 3 backs, and they ran right at the Vikings. And the ones they ran at were on the outside edges on Eller and Marshall. And they neutralized them. And then offensively, the Vikings just could not get anything going that day at all. Although John Henderson, the Viking wide receiver, did have 7 catches for, I believe, 111 yards, but he didn't score a touchdown. So, but yeah, that was that game. If you ask anybody that played, any of the players that played in all 4 Super Bowls, the Kansas City one is the one that hurts the most because they were favored. They were heavy favorites.
Yeah. They so that was the AFL pretty much from what Lynn Dawson was saying that the AFL saved his career because before he became a Chiefs quarterback, he was actually a backup in the NFL.
Yeah, he was the Steelers.
Yeah.
He's a backup at the Steelers.
So he never played for the Steelers. He was only a backup.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the Super Bowl that was at Tulane Stadium.
Yep.
That's in New Orleans. That's New Orleans for people who don't know. It was obviously the Superdome wasn't built yet. The people still thought the AFL was still a fluke at that point, even though the Jets did beat the Colts the prior year. People still thought it was a fluke, a win. So the Vikings were 12. They were 12. The Vikings were 13.5-point favorites.
Yep.
12-2 record. And they beat the Rams 23-20 in the Western Conference title game, and they beat Cleveland 27-20, 27-7 in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah. The Rams conference game, the Vikings were losing at halftime 17-7. And then it just, that whole change of momentum, the Vikings put it together in the second half and beat them 23-20. The next week in that championship game, now this is when they played outdoors. The temperature was only 7 or 8 degrees above. It was cold.
Yeah.
Alan Page even tells the story. It was a very cold game, and they had heard, and he don't know how true this was. One of the players, the Cleveland players, had broke his hand or something. It might have been a finger. Well, they numbed it up with Novocaine, I guess, to numb it. Well, the big problem was frostbite set in. That's how cold it was. The guy got frostbite. And that was not, and the Vikings didn't have the heaters on the sideline or nothing like that. I don't think the Browns did either. But and from the Cleveland game, the Vikings just came out, took control of that game from start to finish. So going into the Super Bowl, judging how the Vikings had won their last game, everybody's like, oh, Minnesota, this will be a cakewalk for the Vikings. They just automatically assumed. And Kansas City came in there and they surprised the Vikings. They really did. That's, they handled the front four. The Vikings turned the ball over early. They couldn't move on offense. Kansas City came up with a game plan on the defensive side of the ball that Minnesota could run the ball, but their all pro was Mick Tingelhoff. What the Chiefs did was they put both Buck Buchanan and Curly Culp, they lined him up. They lined those two guys up on Tingelhoff, which neutralized Tingelhoff. And the Steelers did that too in Super Bowl IX. But when they neutralized Tingelhoff, the Vikings couldn't run the ball, and Joe Cap wasn't the best passer. So
so
that
it was wet conditions.
it rained,
and it rained, and it said they only held the Vikings offense to 67 rushing yards.
Yep.
They forced 3 interceptions and recovered 2 fumbles. I'm sorry, but if you turn the ball over 5 times, you're not winning the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, they turned the ball over. Cap threw 3 interceptions.
Yep.
And then Charlie West fumbled a kickoff. And I forget who else fumbled, but yeah, they turned the ball over a bunch of times. I think the Vikings only had 1 turnover, and that was, I think, a Paul Krause interception. I think that was it.
Yeah, which wouldn't.
But it was actually close there. The Vikings came out in the second half and started to make a game of it.
Yeah, they. So the first quarter began. The Vikings began the game by receiving the opening kickoff and marching from their own 20-yard line to the Kansas City 39-yard line, with Cap completing his first 2 passes for 36 yards. Cap next pass was also a completion, but running back Bill Brown was slowed by linebacker Bobby Bell, who went to the University of Minnesota, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Then brought down by defensive end Mays for a yard loss to make it 3rd down, which Cap failed to connect with tight end John Beasley. Minnesota only rushed for 6 yards and had to punt. Then the Chiefs drove 42 yards in 8 plays, including a 20-yard reception by wide receiver Frank Pitts and Vikings defensive back Ed Schackerman gambled trying to make an interception. Kansas City then scored on a Jan Suderu's 48-yard field goal.
The only reason Ed Schrockman was starting, because Ed Schrockman had lost his starting job to Bobby Bryant, but Bobby Bryant got hurt. So Bobby Bryant was on all 4 Super Bowl teams, but he only played in 2 Super Bowls. So, and then the other corner for the Vikings, Ursel McBee, he was playing with a separated shoulder. And the effects of that separated shoulder came into play later in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, right away, you could see it starting to – I wasn't alive for the game, but I can imagine you can start to see it.
It's you know what? It's actually on YouTube, the whole telecast.
Yeah.
The whole TV telecast. I actually watched it. I decided to watch it. I've seen the highlights for years. I seen the highlights, and then of course now this is the game. This is a Super Bowl where the NFL wired Hank Stram. They had him mic'd up. I think he was the first one to be mic'd up. They had him mic'd up on the sideline for this game, and besides him, saying what he said, he made the derogatory remarks towards the Vikings, towards Carl Kasulki. He couldn't say his name, so he called him Kasuki. He couldn't say Kasulki. And a lot of the Vikings, even when years went by, a lot of the guys that played in that Super Bowl, they had regards for the players, but they had very little nice to say about Hank Stram because of what he said about them. And it still to this day bothered them. So there was that, and Stram was kind of a boisterous coach. He really was.
Yeah, that's kind of why I don't like. I didn't like the Chiefs for a long time because of that film of him doing all that talking. Yeah,
and that right there. Kansas City was, prior to what Dallas was, the most hated team by Viking fans because of what Hank Stram said, and then eventually with everything that happened to Carl Kasulki later on.
Yeah. So
when he said that was just a turnoff, and which the next season, when they opened the season in 70, they opened up against Kansas City. The fans remembered. The fans were actually throwing stuff at Stram and the Chiefs as they were coming off the field, from everything from like food to pop to, they weren't throwing batteries. I think the one thing a lot of people were throwing were like jelly beans, but they were throwing it at them as they were coming, off the field. And I got a picture of it somewhere. But yeah, it was, the Viking fans remembered, and the Vikings remembered. But yeah, it just that day. Well, the Vikings weren't prepared.
Well, that comes back to that play that everybody knows on the when he was wired up about he knew the Vikings' aggressiveness on defense made them
Oh, the 65 toss trap.
yeah, made them susceptible to the trap.
Yeah,
And Mike Garrett's rushing touchdown came on a trap play.
yeah, and they what they did was, and this is as good as Alan Page was. He was so quick off the ball, but trap plays worked on him. Even as years went on, the trap plays worked because he was so quick off the ball and he would penetrate. Well, what happened was the Chiefs exposed that, and teams kind of remembered that as the years went on. And Allen never changed his style of play, which I'm glad he didn't. But yeah, traps did work on him, and they got that touchdown. You could have ran a truck through it.
Yeah, and they said that the Chiefs ran a totally different scheme than they ran any time before. So the Vikings.
Yeah, they changed it from what they ran the week before with the Raiders. It was a completely different game plan, completely different.
And they put Buck Buchanan, who was 295,
on top of Tingle
was 235.
Yeah, big difference. And he also had help with Curly Culp, and Curly Culp wasn't light himself. And Buck was 6'8".
Yeah, I mean
6'7" or 6'8".
He was known. Tingelhoff was known as the Greyhound. I mean, when you're known as a Greyhound, that pretty much defines how you play. You're quick and off the ball. You're fast, but you're not very big.
Now, and the Chiefs also had they had Bobby Bell, who was drafted by the Vikings, and he signed with. I think were they the Texans then? The Dallas Texans? No, they might have been the Chiefs, but he signed with them instead of signing with the Vikings. And they also had Aaron Brown, who went to the University of Minnesota, starting at defensive end. So they had two Gopher starters. That defense, though, was full of Pro Bowlers, AFL All-Pros, and Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
So it was no slouch. And just the Vikings' strength was running the ball, and they could not do it that day. They could not do it.
So after they got of course, it's Hagstrom, so who knows what, how much he says. He goes a field goal that the Vikings were shocked that the Chiefs attempted a 48-yard field goal. Sitterud was one of the first stalker-style kickers in professional football.
Yep.
Charlie and Pete Gogliak were the other two. And then
Gerald Premium was in there. He played too.
The soccer-style place kickers was used against that for the foot. When the more conventional place kickers kick straight on with their toes. So then after that, the Vikings got the ball in the field goal and did a 3-and-out. So on the first play of the ensuing drive, Dawson threw a 20-yard completion to Pitts, followed by a 9-yard pass to Otis Taylor, and that was the end of the first.
Mm-hmm.
So it looked like doesn't look like a lot of plays happened. It looked like they were probably old school football to where they pretty much took all the time in between plays before they did anything.
Oh yeah, it was basically run, pass, run. It was mostly running. It wasn't an offensive juggernaut game, put it that way. It was actually like, for that era of football, it was football.
There was I think the Vikings only had 289 total yards or something like that.
They didn't have much offense. They didn't. It's of course, now here's another thing too. A lot of people are used to you have 2 weeks to prepare between the championships and the Super Bowl, which happened later. At this time, it was only a week. So the week before, the Vikings played in the championship game. So they had a week to get ready for the Chiefs. And what the Chiefs did was change their whole game plan. They changed their game plan completely. So whatever the Vikings saw on film, they didn't see on the field. It was a completely different look. And but yeah, they just never got the offense going. Cap could never get in a sync. He just couldn't. I know he threw 3 key interceptions. Gene Washington dropped like a for sure touchdown. He had a pass and he just dropped it.
And then there was also that penalty against Shockerman on the third down play to Len Dawson.
Shirakman got called.
Yeah, when Len Dawson he threw an incomplete pass and Shockerman was called for pass interference.
Yeah, so
at
Shirakman
the 31-yard line of Minnesota.
Yeah, and that kept the drive alive. So it's the the Vikings kind of were their own worst enemy that day.
Yeah. On the second play of the Vikings drive after the Chiefs went up 6-0 after that pass interference call. On the second, that's when John Henderson fumbled after catching a 16-yard pass. And Johnny Robinson for the Chiefs recovered it on the Minnesota 48-yard line.
Okay. That was the other fumble.
Yeah. And then, so after that fumble, Alan Page tackled running back Garrett for a 1-yard loss. And then Paul Krause intercepted Dawson's pass at the 7-yard line on the next play.
Okay.
So that was the one Chiefs turnover. It was an interception by Dawson in the second quarter. So Krause picked off Dawson in the second quarter.
And that was probably, I'm going to be honest with you, one of the few turnovers I remember the Vikings getting in a Super Bowl. In all the Super Bowls they were in, I don't remember them getting many, if any, turnovers, to be honest.
They turned the ball over, but I don't think they got many.
Yeah, they turned the ball over a lot, but they just defensively couldn't get a lot of turnovers. Yeah.
And then on the next, so after the interception, the Vikings, Joe Kapp threw 2 interceptions and a delay of game penalty, forced them to punt from their own 5-yard line. So that they didn't even get past the punt didn't even go past the 50-yard line. It was at the 44-yard line. Bob Lee kick only dropped for 38 yards, and then a 19-yard run by Pitts in a round played the over aggressiveness over pursuing Vikings defense to set up a field goal. So it was 9-0 halfway through the second quarter. Kansas City. And then on the very next kickoff after that field goal, that's when Charlie West fumbled on the kick return.
Yeah,
and it was recovered at the Minnesota. It was recovered at the 19-yard line.
Yeah, and it works. And just like now, back then, short fields, you can't let a team have short fields, and the Vikings did, and that's where they scored on the Mike Garrett run, right, on that drive.
Let's see. Let me go back to that. Yeah, that was the 66 power trap, toss power trap.
Yep.
Because on the first play after the turnover, Marshall sacked Dawson. And then there was a 13-yard run by Wendell Hayes and a 10-yard reception by Taylor. They gave them a first down at the Vikings 4, and that's when 3 plays later that's when they called the play that everybody knows about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just, it's if things could go wrong, they went wrong. And for the Vikings that whole year, they had got the bounce of the ball. They had dictated the games pretty much to their, to the way they wanted to. But with this game, they just couldn't do it. I think Bud had no answer for him. He had no answer.
So that was pretty much it for the second quarter. The Vikings got the ball back, and Fred Cox tried a 56-yard field goal, but it was short.
It's why they even did that. And I know the goalposts were right at the goal line at the time.
Right.
But, as long as kick was 50 yards there earlier that season, but why they would try a 56-yarder, not with Cox, I don't know.
Yeah, basically, usually when you get a lead like that, they're saying at this point, the combined history of the NFL and AFL championship games, including the first 3 Super Bowls, no team had lost a game when holding more than a 10-point lead.
Yeah.
No matter what time of the game it was, the Chiefs, when they were in Dallas, Texans, in the last game before they became the Chiefs, lost a 17-0 lead in the 62 championship game, but managed to defeat the Oilers 20-17 in the second overtime. And that was the first time that anybody would ever lose a lead until Super Bowl 51 when the Falcons did.
Wow, that was 50 some odd years later.
Yeah. So, like I said when we started this show, we're doing Vikings history. The history hurts.
Yeah, it does.
So, I mean, it's not all puppy dogs and unicorns over here. So,
no, if you're going to be a Viking fan, you got to be ready for this bullshit. Put it that way, because it's there's a lot of pain involved. And the Super Bowls are living proof of it. Those of us that are old enough to remember.
Yeah, this was the like I said, I wasn't alive for this one, but the third quarter, the Vikings managed to stop the Chiefs on their first possession, and then Cap completed 4 consecutive passes for 47 yards and rushed for 7 more yards. And then Minnesota made the first third down conversion, and it drove 69 yards in 10 plays. And that's when Dave Osborne got the 4-yard touchdown, reducing the lead to 16-7. However, the Chiefs responded on the next possession with a 6-play, 82-yard drive. Pitts picked up a key first down with a 7-yard left-to-right run on the reverse play, again attacking the Vikings' aggressiveness. Then after a 15-yard personal foul against the Vikings, Dawson to Taylor hit Taylor with a short pass. Taylor caught the ball at the Vikings' 41-yard line, broke Aerosol Maccabee's tackle, raced down the sideline, broke through Viking safety Carl Kasulki's tackle, and scored a clinching touchdown on a 46-yard play. So there was no scoring in the fourth quarter because after that last touchdown,
after that the sails were out of the Vikings. It was pretty much a done deal.
Yeah.
But that touchdown pass, that's where I said. Now, and Otis Taylor was a big guy. Otis Taylor, I think, was about 6'3", 6'4", but he was a big receiver. Ursel McBee was playing with a separated shoulder. And when he hit him, he tried to hit him with the shoulder that was separated, and he tried to bring him down with it, and it didn't work. Well, then, Kasulki was basically trailed him, tried to make the tackle at the goal line, couldn't do it. That's where Stram said, "Look at that Kasuki run like a chicken with his head cut off." And that's where that came from. But yeah, and the Vikings blitzed on that play too, which was the problem. Once that they got that touchdown, it was a wrap.
So neither team was really great offensively.
No.
The Vikings had 13 first down, the Chiefs 18. They had both Vikings had two first downs by rushing, 8 by the Chiefs got 8 by rushing. It was 10. Vikings got 10 first downs by the pass. The Chiefs got 7 by the pass. There was first down penalties. The Vikings had 1. Chiefs had 3. Third down efficiency. Vikings were 3 of 9, and the Chiefs were 7 of 15. So the Chiefs were a little bit better. Looks like neither team went for it on fourth down at all. Of course, back then you really didn't.
You really didn't know.
Net yard rushing, the Vikings only had 67 yards on 19 attempts, whereas the Chiefs had 151 yards on 42 attempts. So, but that sounds like a big number, but it was only 3.6 yards per carry, and the Vikings had 3.5 yards per carry. So, yeah, the Chiefs had more rushing yards, but they ran it a lot more as well. They only threw the ball 17 times, which is Joe Cap had as many completions as Dawson had attempts.
And back then it was both leagues were running leagues. Football was a running game.
Yeah,
you won with a good running game and good defense. And when the Vikings did have to throw the ball, and Cap was not a very good passer.
No, if you ever watch video of Joe Cap, it's awful.
Yeah, he's not a very good passer. So
who knows if we had Tarkenton, how that game would have went.
Yeah. Bud wanted to keep him. Fran wanted to leave. So, it's you kind of and Cap didn't play the whole game. Cap got hurt. Cap got knocked out of the game, I believe, in the fourth quarter. And I believe
Kuzio.
Quazzo came in. Yeah, Quazzo came
Quazzo,
in.
sorry, I could never say his name right.
Yeah.
The final play was an interception to Emmett Thomas.
Yeah, who, by the way, became a Viking coach later on.
Yes. He was also with Packers too, wasn't he?
And he was with the Packers, but he
Yeah.
became a Denny hired him as I forget it. I think he was a defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Yeah, he hired him as a defensive coordinator. So yeah, he did become a Viking.
The biggest difference in that game, because each team had 3 sacks, the biggest difference in that game was the turnovers. So the Vikings had 5.
Yeah.
The Chiefs only had 1.
Yeah, you're not gonna win games like that.
So the total net yards was only 239 for Minnesota in that game, but the Chiefs only had 273 themselves.
You know what? If you don't have the turnovers, it might be a close game. It might be hard to say.
Yeah.
Minnesota just wasn't ready for that. And that's probably going to be the theme for this tonight's thing. The Vikings just weren't ready for their Super Bowls. Offensively, they just weren't.
Is that a Bud Grant thing, or
that falls squarely on the coach? Yeah, that falls squarely on the coach. He didn't have them guys ready. Especially with the next Super Bowl, they were Miami just ran up and down the field on us in Super Bowl 8.
The only person who really had a good game was Henderson. 7 catches for 111 yards.
Yep, he was the only bright spot. Once again, we couldn't run the ball, so Osborne and Dave Brown and Bill Brown were neutralized. Clint Jones was primarily our kickoff guy, but
he had a 33-yarder.
Yeah, and Oscar Reed was our other running back. So yeah, they contained us. We didn't have an answer for that defense, and that defense was pretty good. That Chiefs defense was pretty damn good. I mean, you've got Lanier, Bell, Thomas, Marsalis, Curly Culp, Aaron Brown, Buck Buchanan, Jerry Mays, Jim Lynch. That was a good defense. Johnny Robinson. They were good players. But once again, we didn't. I mean, the Vikings are in the NFL. We never saw them.
Yeah, they. That was a rough game, and obviously nothing has really changed. Because that was the first Super Bowl, and it did not go well.
And here's the funny thing with that. The Vikings opened up the season against the Chiefs in 70 at Met Stadium and beat them 27-10. This is without Joe Cap. They beat him with Gary Quazzo. Cap was holding out. And it was the same team. The only difference was Joe Cap. So it's like, okay, what, you couldn't figure this out in January, but you can figure it out in September? That type of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's, and were the Chiefs better than us? Not really, but they were that day.
And that's all that really matters.
Yeah, that's all that matters. They were better than us that day. But then that was the start of the heartache.
Yeah. So the Vikings would have to wait 4 more years till they got to the next Super Bowl. And that one was against Miami. And that was God. These Urban numbers are throwing me off. That was what Super Bowl
8.
Super Bowl 8. Yeah. So,
first Super Bowl I ever watched.
Yeah, this was. I still was not on the earth yet, because, like I said, I wasn't born until. I was not born until 75. So,
just from what I remember, there was only one name I heard that day, and it was Zonka. only name I heard was Zonka.
Yeah, let's see. Larry Zonka, I think he had
145 yards rushing.
33 carries, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But he only had a long of 16.
Yeah. Here's the thing: they from the kickoff, the Dolphins got the ball first. This, by the way, everybody, these games are all on YouTube. So if you ever want to look them up, they're there, and
Yeah.
it is hard to watch if you're a Viking fan. But just imagine watching it when it first happened. The Dolphins came up with a game plan to basically take it to the Viking front four, especially Alan Page. And Page was the All-Pro. Page had just, he had been defensive NFL MVP 2 years earlier. So they came up with a game plan to run the ball right up the middle of the field on the Vikings, mainly at Alan Page. And blocking Page was Bob Kuchenberg, the Dolphins lineman. I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame or not. He should be if he isn't.
I think he's at least in the Dolphins Hall of Fame.
Right. But right off the bat, it was Zonka. And they took it right to him. And he was getting 10, 10, 11 yards a pop right to that first touchdown. And then the Vikings get the ball and they can't do anything with it. And they punt it. And next thing you know, right back down the field, another touchdown. Who was it? Carl Eller. No, it was Alan Page. Alan Page said when they got up 14-0, he knew it was over. He knew it was over. He knew the game was over. But they just could not stop Larry Zonka. And Bob Greasy, the Dolphin quarterback that game, only attempted 16 passes that whole game.
Yeah, he very much at all in that game. He was 6 of 7. He had 7 attempts, 6 completions for 73 yards.
Yeah, I mean, he did.
Grant Tarkenton was 18 of 28.
Yep. Yeah, we started, and I'll tell you what, the Vikings were moving the ball. They were moving the ball, like, I think in the second quarter, Oscar Reed fumbled. And the Vikings were on the move. Oscar Reed fumbled the ball, and the Dolphins recovered. Well, that killed our momentum. Yeah. And it's just, we could not. And I think, what was time of possession for that Super Bowl?
Let me see. I don't see if they kept the record back. I think they did. Let me see. I'm looking at the stats to see if I can see it here. I don't see it. I might have to read a little bit on here to see it. Okay. Looks like it has every stat but that.
Okay, because I believe the Dolphins dominated that one, but
it wouldn't surprise me by looking at the stats that are on here. Let's see. Time of possession. Here we go. Minnesota had the ball 26 minutes, 15 seconds, 33-45 for the Dolphins. Once again, the Dolphins had no turnovers. The Vikings had 2.
Yeah.
The Vikings had 7 penalties. The Dolphins only had 1.
Yeah, one of those 7 penalties was I think an unsportsmanlike on Page, Alan Page. He got frustrated at the end. He was, thought he threw his helmet. He was literally frustrated.
And that was the first time since the merger that the AFL team was the favorite in the Super Bowl. The Dolphins were the favorite in that game.
So they were
makes sense because they were coming off their.
They were the first time an AFL team was favored. What the Dolphins weren't favored against the Redskins in 72.
This is Pro Football Focus wrote this story for Wikipedia, and that's what they're saying. So I don't know if that's true or not.
I'll have to look at my books and see, but yeah, take Pro Football Focus with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, it's
and it says right here on Wikipedia, written by Pro Football Focus. So
yeah, so I mean, but the Dolphins were coming off that undefeated season. Which now here's a funny thing: Jim Langer, the Hall of Fame center for the Dolphins, he said this, years later after he retired. He actually said that 72 Vikings team that they faced and beat was better than the 73 team. And I was kind of like, I don't know how it could have been because we couldn't run the ball in 72. 73, we had Chuck Foreman, which opened up that offense. But then Chuck was a rookie still, but they hadn't really opened up that offense much. But yeah, he said that 72 team was better.
Yeah. The Dolphins' game plan on defense was to misdirection and negative influence traps because of their over aggressiveness and cross blocking to exploit Minnesota's excellent pursuit. Uh, the Chiefs had used the same tactics and the same on the same defensive line, Super Bowl IV. Jim Longer wrote, "All this was successful right away. We kept ripping huge holes into the defense, and Zonka kept picking up good yardage, especially to the right. We hear Alan Page cussing the whole game because the negative influence plays were just driving him nuts.
Yeah.
He didn't know what the hell to do. On defense, the Dolphins' goal was to neutralize Chuck Foreman, who was Rookie of the Year that year, by using cat quick Manny Fernandez at nose tackle, and to make passing difficult for Tarkenton by knocking down his receivers and double teaming John Gilliam. They were also depending on defensive ends Bill Standifill and Vern Dan Herter to contain Tarkenton scrambling. Coach Don Shula wrote, "In the case of Tarkenton, we wanted to hem him in, and in the case of Page, Eller, and company, we wanted to try to turn their aggressiveness to our advantage. We decided to emphasize negative influence by misdirection and cross blocking, trying to make the Vikings front four commit to the influence of the play and then actually running it elsewhere. The Vikings responded as we anticipated, and then later in the game, we found that the Vikings started hesitating, reducing their charge, and then when they did that, we beat them with straight on blocking."
Yeah, that was basically, and like I said before, the cross traps and all that, they were meant to run at Page. They were meant to run at Page. Gary Larson was older, but he wasn't the star. It was basically Eller and Marshall, but the one they were running at was Page. And it worked. And plus you had Jeff Seaman as a middle linebacker, and it was really only his second year, but he was a good guy. But yeah, they knew what they were doing, and it worked. The Vikings had no answer. No answer at all.
Yeah, the opening tip off, the coin flip, the Dolphins elected and decided to receive. The Dolphins dominated the Vikings right away from the beginning, scoring a touchdown on two 10-play drives on the first quarter. Said Jim Longer, "It was obvious that from the beginning that our offense could overpower their defense. The two drives were very similar, both containing 8 rushes, 2 passes, both of which were complete. On third down conversion and 4 first down picked up. And when Miami did not get penalized, first Dolphins defensive back Jake Scott gave his team good field position by returning the opening kickoff 31 yards to Miami's 38-yard line. Mercury Morris ran right for 4 yards. Larry Zonka cruised through the middle of the two, and quarterback Brian Greasy completed a 13-yard pass to Jim Mandarich to advance the ball to the Vikings' 43-yard line. Zonka then ran the second down for 16 yards, and Greasy completed a 6-yard pass to Marlon Briscoe on the 21-yard line. The 3 more running plays, 2 by Zonka, 1 by Morris, moved the Vikings to the Vikings' 5-yard line, and then Zonka on the very next play ran a touchdown. And then the Vikings went 3 and out. And then the punt return only went for 34 yards. That was Mark Escheld. Scott.
Mike Eyeshide.
Eyeshide, yeah. Scott fumbled the return but recovered the ball, giving Miami better field position than the opening drive. And the Dolphins went 56 yards in 10 plays, aided by 3 runs by Zonka for 28, and Greasy's 13-yard pass to Briscoe, and then the running back Jim Cook's 1 yard, his only touchdown of the season, gave the Dolphins a 14-0 lead. By the time the first quarter ended, Miami had ran 20 plays for 118 yards and 8 first downs and scored touchdowns on the first 2 positions, with Zonka carrying 8 times for 64 yards, Greasy completing 4 of his passes for 40 yards, and the Miami defense held the Minnesota offense to only 25 yards, 6 plays from scrimmage, and one first down. The Vikings advanced only as far as their own 27-yard lines. And,
it was bad.
The Dolphins set the record, which still stands for the largest Super Bowl lead, 14 points at the end of the first quarter. It has since been tied by the Raiders against the Eagles and Green Bay against the Steelers.
Yep.
So this one seems even worse
It was.
than the first one.
It was. From start to finish, Miami controlled it. It was from start to finish, Miami controlled it. It was the Vikings were never in this Super Bowl. Never.
And as someone who grew up in South Florida, I know every single one of those Dolphin things because they are everywhere.
Oh yeah, and most of them came up. They were the same ones that were on the undefeated team. So so they're legends. But yeah, we never were in that game at all. I remember watching it as a kid, and I'm like, this ain't the Viking team I had seen all year. Not at all. And it showed. It showed.
And it just goes on saying the second quarter didn't get much better for the rest of the game. Each team traded punts early in the second quarter. Miami mounted a seven-play drive starting from their own 35-yard line, culminating a 28-yard field goal from Garo Upremian to make it 17-0. Midway through the second quarter, on the first play of the drive, Minnesota was penalized 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct on linebacker Wally Hillenberg. On the previous series, Hillenberg had thrown an elbow through Zonka's face mask, cutting Zonka above the eye, but had not been penalized. Later in the drive, Mercury Morris ran for 10 yards on a third down play from the Minnesota 40-yard line that allowed Miami to get to field goal range.
Yeah, and that was Hilgenberg liked to throw throw elbow shots. They used to call him clothesline Wally, and Zonka had already had his nose broke a bunch of times too. So it was that game. That game and the Raider game were probably the ones where the Vikings just were never in it. Never in it.
Yeah.
So you pick up, you pack up, you move on to the next year.
Yeah. The Vikings had their best opportunity to score in the first half on the ensuing drive. Starting at their own 20-yard line, Minnesota marched to the Miami 15-yard line in 9 plays, aided by Fran Tarkenton's completions of 17 and 14 yards to Stu Voigt, wide receiver John Gilliam's 30-yard reception. Tarkenton's 8-yard run on first down, then advanced the ball to the 7-yard line. But on the next 2 plays, Vikings running back Oscar Reed gained only 1 yard on 2 rushes, bringing up 4th and 1 with less than a minute left in the half. Instead of kicking a field goal, Minnesota attempted to convert the 4th down with another running play. Running play by Reed. However, Reed lost the ball while being tackled by linebacker Nick Bonicani, and Scott recovered the fumble. About the decision to run with Reed on 3 straight plays, Grant defended decisions since the Vikings twice converted in the NFC Championship game against Dallas. If it's less than a yard, we go for it, he said. We feel we have the plays to make it. The Dolphins, however, made it stop. The Cowboys had not. Jim Langer wrote that at halftime, we definitely knew the game was over.
Here's the thing. You got Chuck Foreman in the backfield. Why didn't you give the ball to him? Bud did that twice because he did it in Super Bowl 11 with friggin' Brett McClanahan at the goal line. Yeah. Why don't you give that ball to your all-pro Chuck Foreman?
It was like when Seattle threw the ball instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch.
Right, and Chuck Foreman even said this. Chuck was like, these sometimes coaches overthink it. They overthink
trying to be cute.
Right, and Chuck was like, even in Super Bowl 11, he's like, we had the ball at the 1 yard line. You had Ed White, the strongest man in the NFL. You had Ron Yeary, perennial All-Pro. Those guys would have rose to they were both All-Pros, challenged the Raiders. And when you challenge the Raiders, give the ball to your money man, which was Chuck Foreman. Yeah. I never understood that. And just giving the ball to Oscar Reed and Brent McClanahan and whoever else that wasn't named Foreman is a mistake. And that's coaching. That is coaching.
And this was also probably another biggest play in the Super Bowl. On the third quarter, the opening kickoff, Gilliam returned it 65 yards. but there was a clipping play that moved it back to Minnesota's 11-yard line. Tarkenton was then sacked for a 6-yard loss by Manny Fernandez, forcing Minnesota to punt from the 7-yard line. Scott returned the punt 12 yards to the Vikings' 43-yard line. So they're already in pretty much scoring position.
Yeah, and Mike Eichscheid was not the best punter. He really wasn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, they already, I mean, they knew they were going to win.
But then Zonka marched 43 yards in 8 plays to score. Miami marched 43 yards on 8 plays to score on Zonka's 2-yard touchdown run through. He ran through Hillenberg to increase the lead to 24-0 with almost 9 minutes left in the third quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there was a pass to Woolfield to Minnesota 11-yard line. That was the key on the drive. It was 3rd and 5. He completed a 27-yard pass.
Yeah, it's just by this time, I mean, and the Viking players were like, once that dejection sets in, it's like, fuck. It's like they just it just nothing worked. And from what I remember, it looked like the Vikings made no adjustments at all at halftime. And that's coaching,
And then on the next drive, the Vikings got the ball back, and that was the only touchdown of the game was a Fran Tarkenton scramble. It was the first touchdown, according to but it was the first time a quarterback rushed for a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Then the Vikings did an onside kick to get the ball back, and they recovered it, but there was an offside penalty.
There was a lot of penalties in this game for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, there was. Vikings had 7 penalties for 65 yards. The Dolphins only had 1.
And see, that's a lot of penalties even for back then. And usually when you get a lot of penalties like that, it's both sides, but this was all on the Vikings. So,
Yeah.
From what I remember from that Super Bowl, I remember Alan Page complaining that they were holding him and he had a just cause. That's why he flipped out the way he did. If you ever watch it, there's highlights where he literally throws his helmet off at the official and he's screaming his head off. And he said because they were holding him all day and it never got called. So, and it's just as a Viking fan, it was a frustrating day. It really was.
Yeah, it says with 4 minutes to play, a frustrated Alan Page was called for a personnel foul for a late hit on Greasy. And then 2 plays later, both Page and Kuchenberg were given offsetting personnel fouls after getting to a scuffle with each other.
Yep. Yeah, it came to a head. It did. It came to a head.
But once again, the Vikings offense, that unlike the first game, this was more of a. I mean, both Super Bowls were bad, but this one was more of a total team just not showing up.
Oh, this was a total team loss.
They only had 182 yards passing by Tarkenton, no touchdowns, interception. Oscar Reed had the most yards rushing in the game. He had 11 carries for 32 yards. Chuck Foreman only ran the ball 7 times for 18 yards.
What? Oh.
And then Fran Tarkenton was the next with 4, then Ed Marinaro, and then Bill Brown. Larry Zonka ran the ball 33 times for 145 yards. Mercury Morris had 11 carries for 34 yards.
What did Jim Kick do?
Jim Kick had 7 carries for 10 yards and 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
And then Foreman had the most receptions. He had 5, but he only had 27 yards. Gilliam had the most yards at 4. Stu Voigt had the most yards at 46.
Stu Voigt did?
Stu Voigt had 3 receptions for 46 yards. John Gilliam had 4 receptions for 44 yards.
Oh, geez, so it's pretty close.
And then Ed Marinaro had 39 yards.
How many? I know Marinaro had like a decent catch that went for like 17, 20 yards.
Aaron Marino's long was 27.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
Stu Voigt had a 17-yarder, and John Gilliam had a 30-yarder.
Okay, yeah. And the other wide receiver playing opposite him was Carroll Dale and Jim Lash. They split time.
And neither one of them had a catch.
And neither one of them
had the Lash had 1 for 9.
Okay. So, but yeah, none of them were, that was a team loss.
Well, the Dolphins were very good, though.
They were.
At that time.
They were a very good team.
Yeah.
They were a very good team.
Yeah, they were very good.
But it ain't like, here's the funny part about it, though. Back then in preseason, we used to play the Dolphins all the time. And also in preseason, your starters played most of those games. So it's not like we hadn't played them before. And plus, we played them in 72. And we were a lot closer in 72 than we were in Super Bowl 8. The Vikings were just not ready for the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Story of their life, right?
Yeah, they just were not ready.
That goes back to coaching. I mean, as great as of a coach that Bud Grant was.
Oh, that was a knock on Bud. He just never got the team ready for the Super Bowls. And the players, even like Stu Voigt, years later, they were just snake bit. It's one of those things where you just don't know. I mean, put it this way, the Bills went 4 straight years with Marv Levy as their head coach, and they, with each Super Bowl, they got progressively beat worse, but that they just weren't ready. It's like, why not? What happened? So yeah, I mean, Bud, we got the teams there, but we just could not get over the hump for whatever reason.
Which seems to be the story.
Which seems to be the storyline for Viking history.
Yes. And I believe they went back the very next year.
Yep. They were 10-4, and they beat the Cardinals in the divisional playoffs, and they beat the Rams in the championship, and they ended up playing the Steelers. That was the closest Super Bowl.
This is the one that of all 4 of them, because the Raiders beat their ass.
The Raiders was an ass beating, yeah.
This is probably the one that they should have won.
Yep. This is the one where you're only losing 2-0 at halftime.
Yeah.
They were only losing 2-0. Yep. But once again, they couldn't run the ball. They could not run the football. I think the Steelers set the record at the time. I think they only gave up a total of 17 yards rushing.
Yes. Chuck Foreman had 12 carries for 18 yards. Fran Tarkenton ran it once for no yards. Dave Osborne had 8 carries for -1 yard.
Yeah, every time I remember Osborne, he was stuffed at the line or he was caught in the backfield.
Tarkenton threw for 102 yards, but he had 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
So again, the Vikings had 5 turnovers. The Steelers only had 2.
Yeah, and the only reason we scored, Matt Blair blocked a punt that was recovered in the end zone by Terry Brown for the touchdown. And I think it was 9-0 when that happened. But I mean, at halftime it was 2-0 Steelers.
Yeah, as many predicted, the game was low scoring. Both failed to score a touchdown or a field goal until the third quarter. It ended up with the third lowest total combined points in Super Bowl history.
Yep.
The first quarter of Super Bowl 9 was completely dominated by both teams' defenses.
Yeah,
the Vikings had limited to 20 passing yards, 0 yards rushing on 1 first down. The Steelers did slightly better with 18 passing yards, 61 yards rushing, and 4 first downs. Pittsburgh even managed to get close enough for kicker Roy Jarrella to attempt 2 field goals, but he missed his first attempt and had a bad snap to prevent the second one from getting off the ground.
Oh, by the way, with this Super Bowl was played at Tulane Stadium. This Super Bowl was supposed to be played at the Superdome.
But it wasn't ready yet.
But the Superdome wasn't ready yet. So they ended up playing at Tulane Stadium. I think that might have been the last game at Tulane Stadium. I'm not sure. But yeah, that Super Bowl was supposed to be played at the Superdome, and it rained that Super Bowl too.
We completely agree, Bob. Hey, like we said when we started this show, there's going to be some pain involved.
Welcome to our world, Bob. Yeah, those memories we buried deep down, they're all of a sudden coming back to the surface, and it's just like you you just shake your head. Um, and the thing was, the Steelers weren't that better of a team.
No,
Although,
they
yeah,
were the Vikings were probably the better team.
right. Although Franco gained what 158 yards.
Franco had 158 yards on 34 carries,
What's that average?
4.6.
Okay.
And then Rocky Blair had 17 for 65, but he also had a fumble. Terry Bradshaw ran it 5 times for 33 yards. They didn't do anything throwing the ball.
No, and neither team did. I think the weather had something to do with that too.
Yeah,
Um,
Chuck Foreman led. Uh, he had more yards than anybody else in the Super Bowl. He had 5 receptions for 50 yards,
yeah,
and that was the most.
but the defenses were the story. We
Yeah,
just could not. Well, here's what happened. We thought we had a fumble recovery late in the game, um, but what happened was the whistle had blown. They said, and he fumbled after the whistle was blown, which was kind of like
of
maybe
course he did.
a quick whistle.
Yeah,
And the Steelers scored on that, and that kind of took the sale. But we just it there really was no quit in the team. There really wasn't. Not this Super Bowl.
they could have had a chance to have the lead. Actually, Fred Cox missed a 39-yard field goal.
Yep, he missed a field goal. And the safety they got was a gift because it was a botched handoff between Tarkington and Osborne. But yeah, it was. I mean that game, you felt like the way that game was played and the way it ended, you were kind of like, okay, we're gonna get one. We're gonna win one of these damn Super Bowls eventually. And sure enough, 75 rolled around. I thought they were. I think the whole country thought the Vikings were. And then that bullshit with the Cowboys. But
Yeah. So the longest play of the game was in the second quarter. It was a 22-yard pass from Tarkington to Stallworth. But the Vikings forced him to punt, and it was booted a 39-yard punt. Sam McCollum did not allow the ball to reach the end zone. They failed to make a return and was down. The ball was down at the 7-yard line.
okay.
The first score of the game occurred 2 plays later when halfback Dave Osborne fumbled a pitch from Tarkington at the 10-yard line. The ball rolled backwards into the end zone. The Vikings Tarkington recovered the ball to prevent a Steeler touchdown, but was down by Dwight White for a safety, giving Pittsburgh a 2-0 lead. It was the first safety ever scored in the Super Bowl history. The Vikings forced a 3-and-out, and then threatened to score when Tarkington led them on a 55-yard drive to the Steelers' 20-yard line. With 1:17 left in the half, Tarkington threw a pass to receiver John Gilliam at the 5-yard line. But Steelers safety Glenn Edwards hit him just as he caught the ball. The ball popped out of his hands and into the arms of Mel Blount for an interception.
Yep.
The half ended at a 2-0 lead for the Steelers, the lowest score ever in the first half in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Other than the 0-0 tie.
Yeah, that was when you come that close, you just kind of like, oh fuck.
And then the third quarter started, and it was an unintentional onside kick when the kicker from the Steelers slipped, and Bill Brown fumbled it.
Bill Brown muffed the kick. He muffed the recovery. Yep, he muffed the recovery.
And then Marv, I guess it's Kellum, Kelum, recovered
Marv Kellum recovered, yeah.
Yeah, and on the ball at the Vikings 30-yard line.
That's the drive they scored on, right?
So Franco Harris then moved the ball to the 6-yard line on a 24-yard run. After being tackled for a 3-yard loss, Harris carried the ball for 9 yards and a touchdown, giving the Steelers a 9-0 lead.
Yep. Yep, 9-0.
And then both teams exchanged punts. Then Minnesota got the ball back on their own 20-yard line. On the second play of the drive, Tarkenton's pass was deflected behind the line of scrimmage by L.C. Greenwood. I'm sorry, I know he played for the Steelers, but that's a pretty awesome name. And bounced
Oh
back.
yeah, he was a good player.
Yeah,
Damn
and
good
bounced right into the arms of Tarkenton, who then threw a 41-yard pass completion to Gilliam. Officials ruled Tarkenton's first pass attempt was a completion to himself, and thus the second attempt was a legal forward pass. After the penalty, facing 3rd and 11, Minnesota got the first down when running back Chuck Foreman, 12-yard run. 3 plays later, Tarkenton completed a 28-yard pass to Stu Voigt at the Steelers' 48-yard line. But White deflected Tarkenton's next pass attempt, and Joe Green intercepted the ball into the Vikings' best offensive scoring opportunity. But that was a pass behind the line of scrimmage, right?
No. Which one? The Joe Green interception?
It says Tarkenton's pass was deflected behind the line of scrimmage. So shouldn't that should be allowed to be a double pass because it was behind the line of scrimmage? So
no, because he threw 2 forward passes.
So when the ball was deflected in the backfield, it was
when the ball's deflected, it went forward. He knocked it back, so it's a batted pass.
Okay. Well, I didn't know if it was thrown behind the line of scrimmage and it was also knocked. Was pass and knocked down, and then he threw it again because then that should have been a completion, should have counted.
But Pro Football Focus explained it wrong. It was a forward pass. It was batted down. Tarkenton caught it before it hit the ground. So you can't throw the ball forward after that once it's been batted back. That's why that pass was. That's why the pass to Gilliam was brought back, because it was 2 forward passes.
If they play like they did Monday night, they got a chance.
Yeah.
I don't know what Viking team that was Monday night, but that was not the Vikings team of the last 2 years.
It wasn't a damn KOC team.
No, that was not the same team we've seen the last 2 years Monday night.
Bob Swede, you're right. The refs always have screwed the Vikings. That's why Bud Grant was one of the first ones to say the NFL should have full-time refs. He was the first one. He said it.
The refs are getting killed this year.
Oh, God, yeah.
They're getting killed this year.
Yeah.
The Browns got 2 straight wins because who would ever thought the Browns would,
Yeah, it's just and even then, I mean, the way they the first in Super Bowl late, they only called 1 penalty on the Dolphins. And then in the next Super Bowl, what were the penalties for Super Bowl?
I'm checking right now. The penalties in this game were, let me see. The penalties, they actually called more on the Steelers.
Did they really?
The Steelers had 8 penalties for 122 yards.
What did the Vikings have?
4 for 18.
Wow.
Time of possession was 38-47 to 21-13.
Who had the 38? The Steelers?
Yeah, and the Steelers had 333 total net yards. The Vikings only had 119.
Yeah, because the Vikings couldn't run the ball.
Yeah.
The Vikings could not run the ball. The Steelers could run the ball.
The fact that they only lost by 10 and they couldn't run the ball, I mean.
Yeah. But you know what, though? They probably – I hate to say it, Matt Blair doesn't block that punt and it gets recovered by Terry Brown, we probably get shut out.
First time they get shut out.
Yeah, we probably would have got shut out.
So early in the fourth quarter, the Vikings got another scoring opportunity when Minnesota safety Paul Krause recovered a fumble from Harris on the Steelers' 47-yard line. On the next play, a deep pass attempt from Tarkenton to Gilliam drew a 42-yard pass interference penalty on Pittsburgh defensive back Mike Wagner. That moved the ball up to the 5-yard line. Once again, the Steelers stopped them from scoring when Green forced and recovered a fumble from Foreman. Pittsburgh failed to get a first down on the next position, but the damage was already done by the Vikings not scoring.
Yeah,
then,
that was just
the punt on that play. Pittsburgh failed to get a first down on the next position and was forced to punt from deep in their own territory. Minnesota linebacker Matt Blair burst through the line to block the punt, and Terry Brown recovered the ball in the end zone for a touchdown. God, what the hell's up with Fred Cox? He missed the extra point. How did he miss the extra point back then when they were kicking from the 3?
It happened a lot.
But Cox wasn't a straight-on kicker, though.
Yes, he was.
Oh, was he? Oh, okay.
Yeah. The man who invented the Nerf football. Yeah, he he
must have been one of the last ones then.
It was him, Jim Bakken, Mark Mosley. Blanda was still kicking then. Yeah. Tom Dempsey was in the league too. But they were the last of basically literally a dying breed.
Yeah. And then the Vikings then cut the. They were only trailing 9-6 at this point.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, they were. I mean, the hope was there, but strange things happen, and
then
can't dictate the bounce of the football, which 9 times out of 10 it bounced the direction of the Steelers. So
on the next drive, the Steelers had the ball, 66-yard, 11-play, 66-yard drive that took 6:47 off the clock. They had 3 successful third down conversions.
Mm-hmm.
The first was a 30-yard completion from Bradshaw to Larry Brown. Brown fumbled the ball as he was being tackled, and the officials, back judge Ray Douglas and field judge Dick Dolak, initially ruled the ball fumbled for the Vikings by Jeff Simeon, but the head linesman Ed Marion overruled the call, stating that Brown was down at the contact before the ball came out of his hands.
So it was one official that overruled 3 officials?
Overruled 2 of them. Well, the back judge, and the field judge ruled it a fumble. But the head linesman, so I don't know if the head lineman outranks those 2. It shouldn't really matter. It overruled the call, stating that Brown was down.
Well, then, and I also heard later that it was a whistle. The play had been whistled dead.
Which could be because if Ed Marion ruled him down, he could have blown the whistle. So, and then faced with a 2nd and 15 after a penalty, Pittsburgh then fooled the Vikings defense with, guess what? A misdirection play.
Mm-hmm.
Harris ran left, but ran left past Bradshaw, and after the snap, drawing the defense with him, and while Blauer took a handoff, he ran right to a gaping hole for a 17-yard gain for the Vikings' 16-yard line. A few plays later, Bradshaw converted to 3rd and 5 situation with a 6-yard pass to Blyer. Put the ball on the Vikings' 5-yard line, and the Steelers gained just 1 yard with the next 2 plays, setting up a 3rd and goal from the 4. Bradshaw's 4th yard touchdown pass to Brown gave the Steelers a 16-6 lead with only 3:31 remaining.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that. Larry Brown was playing tight end at the time. He ended up being an all-pro tackle later on. There was also something else about this game too. Fran, to this day, says that the Steelers were on steroids. He said he looked at these guys in pregame warmups, and they were unusually jacked, even for the 70s. And back then,
nothing like what they are now.
Nothing like what they are now, but even for back then, I mean, the stuff they were taking was like horse tranquilizers.
Yeah.
It was horse.
That's what the first iteration of steroids was horse tranquilizers.
Yeah, and they were taking that. And if you notice, many of those Steeler players are gone.
Yeah.
They didn't even live to 50. And
Bradshaw was probably the only one who didn't use them. That's probably why he's still here.
And Joe Green. But Greenwood's gone. Dwight White's gone. Steve Furness is gone. Webster's gone.
Yeah.
And Larry Brown just became pumped when he moved to tackle. I'm just like, God damn, where do you get these muscles? There was something going on in Pittsburgh that these players were jacked like that. Fran to this day still says it. Those guys were on roids.
And then after the Steelers scored, Brett McCallahan returned the ensuing kickoff 22 yards to the 39-yard line. But on the very next play, Tarkenton threw an interception.
Not surprising.
And then they ran 7 consecutive plays to where there was only 38 seconds left to go on the clock, and then they gave the Vikings the turnovers a down.
Yeah.
And of course, the Vikings didn't do anything with the 34 seconds.
Yeah.
So at the time, Harris had 150 yards rushing. That was a Super Bowl record. The Harris's rookie stood until John Riggins ran for 166 yards in Super Bowl 12. Byer had 65 yards and 2 receptions. Pittsburgh finished with a total of 57 rushing attempts, which remains a Super Bowl record through Super Bowl 50.
Yep.
Bradshaw completed 9 of 14 passes for 96 yards. Tarkenton was 11 of 26 for 102 yards and 3 receptions. For as great as Tarkenton was a Vikings quarterback, he did not show up. They talk about Kirk Cousins not showing up. Tarkenton didn't show up.
No. But at least Tarkenton got us there.
Yeah. Foreman was the Vikings' top offensive contributor, finishing the game with the team's leading rusher and receiver. The loss was Vikings' record-setting third in the Super Bowl, and as we know, we have one more. Bud Grant vented frustrating by saying, "There were 3 bad teams out there: us, Pittsburgh, and the officials. Minnesota, among many negative to this point in the Super Bowl history of the 3 games, had only 2 scoring drives on offense and only 3 turnovers forced on defense, none of which resulted in any points."
Yes, Bud was the first one to be vocal about the officials, which kind of, I think that might have got Bud in hot water with the league at times, but he was very vocal about the officiating, very vocal.
So it seems like some of those penalties are probably made-up calls, like they do nowadays. They kind of do make-up calls to make it look like it's more even than what it is, but the game's already the game's already over.
Yep. Yeah, that is not a damn. I mean, even for then, I think it was easier to shave points and stuff than it is now. But you know, it's stuff to make you wonder.
So they had 249 yards rushing as a team. The Vikings had 17.
Mm-hmm.
The Steelers averaged 4.4 yards per carry. The Vikings averaged 0.8.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't run the ball, you're not gonna. Back then, in that era of football, if you couldn't run the ball, you weren't gonna win.
And the punting was awful in that game. The Steelers had 7 punts for an average of 34 yards. The Vikings had 6 punts for an average of 37 yards.
Here's a funny part about that: the Steelers punter was Bobby Walden, who was a former Viking. He spent like 3 or 4 years with the Vikings. And our punter, of course, was Mike Eichheit. I don't know how the hell Eichheit got the gig, but our punter before Eichheit was Bob Lee, the kicker. He played quarterback and punted. So, Vikings really didn't get a good punter till Greg Coleman.
And he was the punter for a while.
Yeah, they really didn't get a good punter until Greg Coleman. So we lose to Pittsburgh. 75 will go into depth later, but that was the year that could have changed our fortunes as Viking fans.
Yeah, that was probably the best Viking team ever, except for maybe 98.
Yep. Yeah, that Viking team was that 75 team probably beats the Steelers in Super Bowl 10. But we know what happened, so it never happened. But that was probably our best chance. And the 76 Super Bowl, the one against the Raiders, the team was a year older.
They were getting older. They
were much older. The Raiders were the Raiders. What's his name even said it? What was his name? Jack Tatum. They said they practiced and they spent more time figuring out what they were going to do after the Super Bowl than actually plays in the Super Bowl. They knew they were going to win. They knew. To a man, they were like, okay, where are we going after the Super Bowl? Where are we going to celebrate? That was the big thing. They knew going into that Super Bowl they were going to win. And once again, in Super Bowl 11, it's not like we didn't have our chances. We had the ball at the 1 yard line. We blocked a Ray Guy punt. The only block punt of his career, I believe, Fred McNeil blocked the punt. And it gets to the 1 yard line, and then you give the ball to Brent McClanahan at the 1 yard line. And once again, that falls on coaching. You know, it's a big game. You give the ball to your, as Jerry Burns used to call them, your big knockers. You give your ball to Chuck Foreman and you let him run, follow the blocks of Ed White and Ron Yeary. That was, that's what you do.
And once again, the Vikings lose the turnover battle.
Yeah, the biggest one was Willie Brown's 75-yard INT return.
It was three turnovers to none. So
the goal line, Willie Hall.
Was that 10? The Vikings have had 10 turnovers, and they've
10 turnovers. 3. Yeah, and I don't think we got a turnover in Super Bowl 11. I could be wrong, but
Raiders
I don't think
did not turn the ball over.
Never turned the ball over.
And the Steelers did not turn the ball over.
What was the Raiders' time of possession in Super Bowl 11?
33-27. So it was a bit closer.
It was a little bit closer.
The Vikings had 26-33.
What's his name ran for 137 yards? Clarence Davis.
Clarence Davis ran for 137. Mark Van Eegen ran for 73.
Oh, Van Eegen had 73?
Yeah, on 18 carries. So Clarence Davis averaged 8.5 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Van Eegen had 18 carries for 73 yards. He averaged 4.6. Carl Garrett, 4 for 19, 4.75 a carry. Hubert Yen, 4.5. And Mike Ray averaged 4.5.
Okay. Oh, by the way, Jim Marshall didn't make a tackle in the Super Bowl. Art Shell completely shut him down. Alan Page went up against Gene Upshaw, but at least Page did get a sack. I think Page had a couple of sacks in this Super Bowl. But what's his name was completely shut down, and that was Jim Marshall. And the Raiders ran to their left side, which was Shell and Upshaw.
It says in the fourth. That's the fourth quarter. It says that. Let me see. So game summary. So it was also the Raiders' only second Super Bowl as well.
Mm-hmm.
They beat the New England Patriots and the Steelers in the playoffs. The Vikings beat the Redskins and the Rams. And then we said the Super Bowl was dominated by the Raiders. Oakland gained Super Bowl record 429 yards, including Super Bowl record 288 yards in the first half.
Yep.
En route to winning the Super Bowl. After a scoreless first quarter, Oakland scored on 3 consecutive possessions to take a 16-0 lead at halftime. The Raiders also had 2 fourth-quarter interceptions, including cornerback Willie Brown's 75-yard return touchdown. Fred Biletnikoff, who had 4 catches for 79 yards, set up 3 Raiders touchdowns. It was an MVP.
Yeah, it was complete dominance by the Raiders. It was, and you knew right then that was probably the Viking swan song. The players knew it. Chuck knew it.
Chuck it definitely was, because they ain't been back since.
Yeah, Chuck knew it because the guys were older and they just were not. I mean, he had the 4 chances, he just couldn't get it. Could not get it.
Yeah, it was. The Vikings won the NFC Central for the 8th time in 9 seasons with an 11-2-1 record.
Yep. Yeah, they were 11-2-1. That 76 team was not as good as the 75 team. Not as good. They were good, but not as good. The defense had gotten older, and it showed. Yeah, they still. I mean, Chuck had a career year. Chuck Foreman, he had a career year. You had Sammy White. You got Ahmad Rashad in a trade, but they were defensively they were older, and then the Raiders were the Raiders. That was probably this. That was the Raiders were the Raiders, and a lot of them highlights they got of the Raiders hitting those cheap shots and those hits that they made were in that Super Bowl. Sammy
Yeah.
White is the most famous one. He got decapitated over the middle by Jack Tatum. Hung on to the ball, but he took a shot.
Yeah. So stop me if you've heard this before. Uh, the Raiders took the opening kickoff and advanced all the way to the Vikings 12-yard line, but came up empty after kicker Earl Mann hit the left upright on the 29-yard field goal attempt.
He was a straight on kicker.
And then later in that quarter, after the teams exchanged punts, the Vikings had a great opportunity to score. When linebacker Fred McNeil blocked a punt from Ray Guy and recovered the ball on the Raiders' 3-yard line. The Vikings special team unit was known for blocking kicks, but this was the first time it ever happened to Ray Guy. It was the only time one of his blocks in his 14-year career was blocked.
Yeah.
However, 2 plays later, Vikings running back Brent McCallahan fumbled the ball while being tackled by Raiders Phil Villapiano,
Villapiano,
and linebacker Willie Hall recovered the ball for Oakland. The Raiders then marched 90 yards to the Vikings' 7-yard line with a 35-yard run by Clarence Davis around the left end from the Oakland 6-yard line, breaking through Minnesota's front. On the drive, 6-play quarterback Ken Stabler completed a 25-yard pass to tight end Dave Casper, with Casper's breaking through what Stabler called 10 tackles. I don't know if it was 10 tackles, but it was a lot.
Yeah, it was that Super Bowl was painful to watch because you knew it was just that was it. And you knew the Raiders was the better team. You did. And I figured
that was probably the only Super Bowl where you could say their opponent was definitely better. The Dolphins might have been a little bit better, but they were definitely better than the Chiefs, and they were probably just as good, if not better than the Steelers.
The Steelers, matter of fact, the Vikings and Steelers were pretty level. Were pretty even.
Yeah, and you could say they were better than the Chiefs, and you could say they were almost even with the Dolphins, but the Raiders were by far and away
the Raiders were by far a better team.
Yeah,
they were, and that's the thing about it. So, it doesn't take they got there, but the fact that we couldn't win one, it just that.
But I mean, it could be worse. It could be the Bills lose 4 in a row, but we still lost 4.
Yeah, the Bills haven't been back in how many years now? What has it been?
Been back since they lost the 4th one as well.
Yeah, they went 4 years in a row. We went 3 out of 4.
4 in 8 years.
Yeah, but see, back then, there were 3 dominant teams in each conference in the NFL. It was either the Vikings, Rams, or Cowboys in the NFC, and it was either Steelers, Dolphins, or Raiders in the AFC.
Yeah.
So it was you didn't have the parity that you finally got in the 80s, which is what the NFL wanted.
Well, it's Pete Rozelle wanted, so
yeah, Pete Rozelle wanted parity, so he got his parity, but he still had dynasties in the 80s with the 49ers and teams like that with Washington, even the Bears.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just it's a painful history for us Viking fans, and those Super Bowls, those of us that remember them, you scratch your head to a person and be like, what the hell were they thinking? What was Bud doing?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. If you could take it back, do it all over again. The players live with that. Those players have played in those Super Bowls. I mean, Alan Page said it best. He hated losing preseason games. He hated losing, period.
Yeah.
And to lose those Super Bowls, I mean, to a man, it hurts. Jim Marshall, it hurts him. It pains him. You can see it when they talk about it, it's hard for them.
Tarkenton got hurt in that game too, didn't he?
No, Tarkenton played the whole game. Sammy White took that shot, but he stayed in the game.
Because it says here Bob Lee had 7 attempts on 9.
That was at the end of the game. End of
so
the game they put Fran in, and Bob Lee threw a 5-yard pass to Stu Voigt for a touchdown. But there was 5 seconds left in the game. So the Raiders were already trying to figure out where they were going to party.
Yeah.
It was over. So yeah, Bob Lee came in basically to mop up. It was cleanup duty.
Yeah. So second quarter, 14-12, 24-yard field goal by Earl Mann. Second quarter, 7-10, Oakland Dave Casper, 1-yard touchdown reception from Stabler. Second quarter, 3:33, Pete Barzanzak, 1-yard touchdown run.
Oh, Banaszak, Pete
Banaszak. Pete Banaszak. Okay. Third quarter, five minutes, 40-yard field goal by Mann. So that's 24-0.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third quarter, 47 seconds left, Sammy White, 8-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
And then Banaszak scored again, 2-yard run. And then the next score was a 75-yard interception. And then the last score of the game, 1:31 left, Stu Voigt, 13-yard touchdown from Bob Lee. But hey, Freddie Cox made the extra point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, too. We were driving on that interception return by Willie Brown. We were driving. And then Fran threw a pass out in the flat, and it was picked off. And basically it was the pass that Kirk threw against Carolina that was turned for a touchdown. Fran threw the same type of pass. Only Brown jumped the route and touchdown.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know what play we're talking about, if you've ever seen the NFL highlight when they have the extreme close up of the Raider guy running with his face.
That's the return.
That's the play.
Yeah,
that's the play.
Return. That's the return. That's Willie Brown.
Yeah, that's when they say "Old Man Willie" because he was like in his 15th year or something like that.
Yeah, Willie Brown was already 13, 14 years in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was but that was, I think he played one more year after that, but he was one of the few Raiders that played against the Packers. He played against the Packers, Gene Upshaw, Pete Banaszak. I don't think Art Shell was there yet. I don't think George Bueller was there either, but yeah, they played that Packer team, which up until then was 10 years earlier, 11 years earlier.
Well, they were in Super Bowl III. And
Super Bowl II. Yeah, they were in Super
Bowl II, and then the Super Bowl where they beat Minnesota. And I think their next Super Bowl was against
the one that beat the Eagles.
Yep. And then the next one was when they lost to the Redskins.
Yep. Yeah, and then they lost to the Buccaneers.
Yep. They should have beat the Patriots, but the Tuck rule.
The Tuck rule. Yeah, the Tuck rule. So, I mean, it's...
So those are the four, and they have not been back since. In fact, we talked about this on the last show. The Vikings have been to 10 NFC championships, and they've lost the last 6.
Yep. Yeah, they haven't.
Not only have they lost the 4 Super Bowls, but they've lost their last 6 championship games.
And 77 was a start because they lost the championship to the Cowboys. And then they lost to the Skins. Then they lost to the Falcons, the Giants, the Saints, Eagles. So it's the
Eagles game was a blowout. The Giants game was a blowout. The Vikings should have beat the Falcons, and they should have beat the Saints.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and you know what? Even that 87 one,
They should have won too, but
they should have won. If that game goes in overtime, they probably win it.
yeah. Thank you, Darren Nelson. I know it wasn't your fault supposedly, but
well, whose fault was it?
wasn't there a guy that ran the wrong route?
Well, they said the one that ran the wrong route was Chris Carter.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well,
he still needs to catch it. He still needs to catch it, regardless.
Yeah.
The ball hit you in the hands. He had Hawkinson disease in that game.
And guess what? That's why the Vikings drafted him, because he could catch.
Yeah.
Just so,
this is probably one of our. This is so far. This is the shortest show we've had.
Yep.
Because
the subject matter
but it's also the most painful.
Yeah.
Show that
the most depressing, painful one we've had. So.
Because you can talk about first round draft picks like we have on this show. There's no pain involved in that.
Mm-mm.
The inaugural season and how the Vikings became a franchise. There's no pain in that. So there really is no Hall of Famers. No pain in that. Coaches, a little bit of pain, but not much.
A lot of head scratching.
A lot of head scratching, but no pain.
A lot of head scratching.
This is by far the most painful show that we've ever had. And we're going to do seasons here pretty soon. I know we want to do the 75 season, but I don't want to do 2 heartbreaking shows back to back. So if you guys have any ideas in the chat of what you guys want us to talk about, we've already done Sarah's show. She was the one who suggested we talk about the first round picks for Minnesota. So if you guys have an idea on your head about what we want to talk about, let's try to pick a positive one if we can. Because we are going to talk about that 75 season, and that's going to be just as painful as probably this one, because that was by far and away.
That's the one I remember.
Other than 98.
Yeah, that's the one I remember the most.
Yeah. And then other than 98, that's by far and away probably the best. 98, 75 are probably the 2 best Viking teams in history.
Yep. And you know what? We can talk about anything.
Yes.
Positions, players, coaches, organizations, things happening in the NFL that affected us back then.
We did front office talks.
We
did that one.
We are open to suggestions, folks.
Yep.
And there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, they've been around for a while. So if there's even if you don't think of one now, put it in the comments section. There's a lot we could talk about. We could talk about. The differences between playing indoors and outdoors, and how the team has not been back
to the stadiums.
The Vikings have not been back to the Super Bowl since they started playing indoors. Right. Stuff like that.
The Vikings in TV, the media.
How the media hates Minnesota.
Especially there's a lot of stuff with the local media too. The national media, there's some stories there. A lot of it's got to do with Howard Cosell and kind of a disdain for us. But yeah, there's a ton of history there, folks. You come up with the subjects, we're thinking of them too. There's a lot to talk about with this team. A lot. More than you think.
I think we found a good time. We've had some good interaction today.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we will keep this at Wednesday nights after the One Bar and Lucky show, so we can bring that fan base over here. Like Viking Funeral, I appreciate you, bud. I love you. You were always here. Bob, you as well. You're always here. I know there's more people here because we have more viewers right now than people are chatting. So I know there's people who are just watching, lurking. So we appreciate you guys as well. You don't have to comment and enjoy the show. But we know you're here. But it's been pretty interactive. A lot of good questions from. I did a lot of reading today, so I wasn't able to bring the comments up. But Bob, we both agree with this.
Yes, just one, so I can die happy.
I don't want to be in my brother's situation. My brother was an Eagles fan. My brother passed away. The same year he passed away, they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I don't want to be that.
I don't want to be
Um,
that either. I just
so,
don't.
um,
As Viking fans, we're due.
yeah.
We're due.
Yeah, it irritates me when someone like a Yankees fan says, "Well, we're due." No, shut the hell up. You ain't due.
Especially a Yankees fan.
Yeah, or a Patriots fan. Well, it's been like 6 years. We're due.
No, you're due
Man,
to suck.
before you got Tom Brady, you guys were awful.
Yeah.
You had that one good season in '85, which, by the way, the Bears got lucky that the Patriots surprised the hell out of the Dolphins, because the Dolphins probably would have beat the Bears that year. They were the only team to beat the Bears, and that game wasn't close. The Dolphins beat them in '85.
Yeah, the Patriots got on a run, and
Yeah,
luckily they won. The Dolphins make that Super Bowl. They probably beat the Bears.
yeah, because they beat the Bears in a Monday night game, and it wasn't close.
It wasn't even close. So
Because they couldn't get to Marino because he got rid of the ball too fast.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. See, you don't want to. Well, that goes back to us being the most successful franchise without winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we do.
Because
Yes,
I think
we do.
I think we have more than any other team. The Packers may have passed us the last
The
couple of
Packers,
years.
the Packers would have passed us anything. The Packers would have passed us because of what they did recently.
Yeah,
But up until then, I mean, when they put the Central Division together, I want to say they did that in '67 when they brought in the Saints, and then they developed.
yeah,
Many people forget this. The divisions were broke up into like Coastal, Capital, Century, and Central, and the only one that stayed status quo was the Central, and that was us with the Packers and the Lions and the Bears.
no, we got you. Yeah, no, we got you.
Oh yeah,
No, it's
there's positives.
it's definitely a positive storyline being having that many division champions. Um, whether it's the North, the Central, or back in the NFC West, when it just was just a division.
And put it this way: when you make it to the Super Bowl, you're the two best teams in the league go to that game.
Yeah,
So the Vikings, having been to the Super Bowl 4 times, tells you they were two of the best teams in the league that year. But it kind of goes back because we were good teams all the other years too. We just could not, for whatever reason, get past the playoff round, and that was because we didn't have a quarterback till we got Tarkenton. But
yeah. Like I said, I think if they have to, Tarkenton played so bad in his Super Bowl, so it's hard to say, but they definitely have a better chance of beating the Chiefs if they had Tarkenton as opposed to Cap.
Yeah, because Tarkenton was mobile. Well, Cap was mobile too, but Tarkenton was mobile and could throw.
Yeah.
Whereas Cap was, I mean, he was a hell of a leader. He just wasn't his.
Well, I mean, he turned down the MVP. He would take the MVP trophy.
Yeah, he turned down the team MVP, but then he plays the me card when he holds out the next year.
Yeah.
So, it kind of offset itself. But to a man, Joe Cap was a leader. He was. Those guys would go through a burning building for Joe Cap. He was just that. He was what he couldn't make up for in quarterbacking. He made up for in leadership. So
looking back at this, it's as great as Tarkenton was, as great as Bud Grant was, as great as the Purple People Eaters were. It just seemed like they got out schemed. That's the reason why they lost.
For whatever reason.
Except for Oakland. Oakland just kicked their ass.
Yeah, Oakland beat them up. Oakland physically beat them. But you just kind of, it's head scratching. You're just kind of like, how were you guys this unprepared? You're kind of like as good. I mean, we had Hall of Famers and all pros up and down that lineup, and we just could not get it done. We could not win. You couldn't win the Super Bowl. But to the credit of the teams that beat us, they were no slouches.
No.
Those teams were no
The
slouches.
Chiefs are probably the worst team to beat us.
No, actually, it's the Steelers. Actually, it would be the
Well, the
Steelers.
Steelers defense was better than what the Chiefs had.
Front four wise, but as a defense
Yeah.
as a whole, the Chiefs were better. And funny, the Chiefs and Steelers use the same game plan
Yeah,
against the Vikings. Misdirections, and on defense, they did the same thing. They clogged up the middle and they put somebody on Mick Tingelhoff, who was undersized. As much as good as Mick was, he was undersized, very undersized.
Kind of like Bradbury.
Right. So, so you could, I mean,
as much as I love Robert Smith, I mean, I got his authentic jersey actually the year that he retired, but he did cost us in that 98 championship game.
Yeah, he ran out of bounds. He ran out of bounds. He should, if he runs, he just stays in bounds.
If he lowers his shoulder and stays in bounds.
Yep. He stays in bounds. Yes, Vikings Funeral, we did beat ourselves a lot in those games. We did a lot of uncharacteristic things that we did not do in the regular season. And that was with the turnovers. I mean, yeah, we would turn the ball over, but not as much as we did in those big games.
I mean, they turned the ball over 10 times and they only got 3.
Yep.
And they got no points off the 3 turnovers that they got.
Exactly.
You're not going to win very many games doing that. It's kind of like this year's team.
Yeah. It's just you if you gotta get the turnovers and you gotta hang on to the ball. You gotta, and we didn't do it. We did not do it. So yeah, it's like history repeats itself.
Yeah.
It is. It's like history repeats itself.
But going back to this comment, what we mean by do is that just like the Twins went into their playoff streak this year, eventually it's got to end sometime. That's what we mean. That's what we
mean by do.
Do, not that we deserve it. It's just mathematically, it's just got to, happen, The offensive line was also an issue with that too, but now that Reiser's in there, that could be different.
Which here's the thing now: do you have that little bit of faith in your offensive line that you don't think they can get a yard? Come on, you're gonna have to show some you're gonna have to show some faith. But I just think KLC just does not want to run the ball.
Well, he proved that last week. I mean, they were gashing the 49ers, and he just stopped running it.
And here's the thing:
he cannot do that Sunday because the Packers cannot stop the run.
The Packers are terrible against the run. So
they allow 145 yards a game rushing.
Yeah, if you don't run against the Packers, that's on you. But yeah, I mean, and also when in these Vikings Super Bowls, that era was running the football, and we did have Chuck Foreman, and we could not run the ball. We just couldn't. And that was probably the most frustrating thing. It's basically they shut down Chuck and they shut down that offense.
That stubbornness from them not running, because reading all this, you can see that the other teams changed up how, like the Chiefs totally changed up how they ran the ball.
Yeah, and Chuck did say this. In the 3 Super Bowls he played in, the Pittsburgh Super Bowl and the Raiders Super Bowl, he said that the Vikings changed the offensive game plan from what they did all year. They changed it. They changed the scheme altogether to what they didn't use what got them to the Super Bowl.
So overthinking it again.
They overthought it. They were overthinking. So they changed it completely.
God, I just want one before I die, Tony. Just one. I'm not greedy. I'm not greedy.
What do you think I've been saying since I was 10?
My God.
I'm 57 now.
This show made me sad. I was in a good mood. I'm sad now.
And you know what? It's if you
I was
win,
all happy if you won Monday. I think they're going to win Sunday. I'm all happy, but damn, I had to bring myself down by talking.
If those teams had won at least one Super Bowl, it would have changed the narrative of this Viking team.
Oh, we'd be happy as hell.
Yeah, just
we'd be able to wear that shirt. We'd be able to wear that shirt that says "Got Rings," or every time the NFL Network does the Super Bowl teams, we can look forward to it instead of instead of saying I don't want to watch any of that.
Yeah, so I lived through, and I was alive for all four, but I watched 3 of them. I don't want to repeat it. I bad enough. I had the guts to watch on YouTube.
Some people are like, "Oh, just get there." No.
If you're thinking of just getting there, then you're missing the whole point of the NFL. You're getting there to get to a Super Bowl and win it. Just getting there. That's basically what the Wilfs are saying. Just get to the playoffs and let it happen. Right. Just get there. It's like, no, you're gonna have to win one, goddamn
it. Is it wrong for me to say, like, I was mad when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, not because the Eagles won the Super Bowl, but because they didn't win one before, and now they won one, and then the Bucs have won 2, and they're their winning percentage is the worst of all time in the NFL. Is it wrong for me to say, okay, this team has won before, they're playing a team that hasn't won before? I want the team that has won before to win again. Well, I don't want to knock another team off that list,
With the Bucs, I always put it like this. They won that first Super Bowl with Tony Dungy's team. Right. And it was John Gruden as a head coach. And I hate that. I hate that. So, and then they win their next Super Bowl, and Tom Brady is their quarterback.
Yeah.
So here's what I want. If the Buccaneers really want to impress me, win a Super Bowl with players that you brought in. From start to finish. Win with players you brought in.
The only other year they were close to that is when they lost to the NFC Championship game 11-6 to the Rams.
Yeah, and that was Tony Dungy.
Right.
And then didn't they fire Dungy?
I think they said something about because that was the
year they made that damn trade with the Raiders for John Gruden.
Because that was the Jeff George season, correct?
No, that was the Corey Stringer passed away.
Right.
It was 01. Yeah, that was 01.
The year after. That's right. The year after they lost to the Giants, they lost to the Rams in the divisional round.
Right.
Yeah.
That was Viking funeral. The Vikings weren't going anywhere. They were not going to LA. That the Vikings were going to stay here because first of all, they weren't. If they had went out to LA, the Wolves would have had to pay for that stadium, and they don't have that type of money.
Right. And as someone who lives in San Antonio, the Jerry Jones would never allow Red McCombs to move the team here.
No, the Vikings were always going to be in Minnesota.
Yeah,
that was.
Trust me. When it comes to football merchandise, I might as well be in Dallas with all the Cowboy stuff that's in San Antonio.
And a history lesson for those Viking fans that don't know: whenever it came up that the Vikings were going to move, the city that was always mentioned was LA. So, it was in the 70s, it was in the 90s, it was in the just recently.
Well, even when the Metrodome was getting ready to close, they're going to move to LA.
They're going to move to LA. And, well, here's the thing now. The stadium here is paid up for.
Yep.
So right now, the Wilfs need to put a product on the field to get us to the Super Bowl. And then get us to the Super Bowl and win the damn thing.
I feel you, Bob.
So, yeah, you know what? If they don't win on Sunday, these last 2 victories are all for naught.
Means nothing.
Means nothing. They've got to win.
I think they will, though. I guarantee on the last show was on before this that they're not going to lose.
Now this is
it's the most Viking thing ever.
Yeah, I don't like to revel in other fans' problems and their, pain, but just looking at the Packers right now and seeing that they got like half the team is hurting. And
I'm happy as hell.
They're ready to, they've already turned on Jordan Love. I love it. I'm just like, I'm waiting.
They're a bunch of spoiled, rotten babies.
I'm waiting for him to get rid of Matt LaFleur.
They're calling for it because I
Um,
listened to Score North. They have the Vikings. They have the Packers vent line on there.
Oh my God,
That is hilarious.
that is
You
hilarious.
guys are the biggest a bunch of spoiled ass babies I've ever seen in my life. You guys have had an unprecedented run. Hell, even the 49ers, who had back-to-back Hall of Famers, didn't have the run you guys have had with Rodgers and Favre. And I told you all that when Rodgers leaves, you guys are going back to being one of the worst teams in the NFL because you know why? Nobody wants to play in Green Bay.
Nope.
Nobody wants to play. I don't know what made Reggie White decide to sign there, but if it wasn't for Reggie White, Packers probably.
Well, Reggie wanted a church.
That's church. That's why. Yeah,
he wanted a church.
Yeah, he got his own church, but he got his own church for signing for Green Bay. They promised to give him a church, and he got one.
Yep.
So before Vince Lombardi, Curly Lambeau, I don't care how good the Packers were in the 20s. It was the 20s. No one gives a shit about how good the Packers were back then. All right. Okay. So after that run they had in quote unquote the 20s, the Packers were sucky. They were not good at all until they got Vince Lombardi. And then they got Vince Lombardi and they went on that run. Vince Lombardi retires. They become the worst team in the league. And then all of a sudden you guys signed Brian Wolf, which was a good decision by you. And then you get Brett Favre, and then you guys get this unprecedented run with these two Hall of Fame back-to-back quarterbacks, but yet you still only won 2 Super Bowls. So you guys are the Roosters are coming home to roost for the Packers right now. And do I feel sorry for you? No.
No.
And I got all this kickback from Packer fans saying, well, I told them, I said, the Packers are going to go back to being one of the worst teams in the league. And I got all this pushback, like it ain't happening, it ain't happening, it ain't happening. Well, you know what? You guys are 2-4. You barely beat an awful, awful, awful Raiders team, and you beat the Bears.
No, they beat the Saints.
I mean, yeah, granted, we beat the Bears too, but
yeah, they beat the Saints.
Justin Jefferson. Oh no, sorry, yeah, they beat the Saints, which is just right.
Which you know what? Let's blame the Saints for that because the Saints are beating them 17-0.
Yeah.
So they're not that. The Packers right now.
If Derek Carr doesn't get hurt in that game, the Saints beat them.
Yeah, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. But I mean,
so yeah. Granted, before we beat the best team, as many considered the best team in the NFL, Monday night, our 2 victories weren't that good, but they also weren't out of any games either. The Vikings beat themselves more than they lost those games. But
yeah, they can. And
when you turn the ball over, though, good teams don't turn the ball over.
No, and they need to stop doing that.
But the Lions got their ass kicked Sunday. The Packers, you lose to the Broncos, which is probably the worst team in the AFC. So, and the Bears beat a bad team. So
yeah, how bad is that Raider team? My God,
how does their head coach keep getting jobs?
Josh McDaniels?
Yes,
I don't know.
Is he Daniel Snyder, the AFC? Does he have dirt on everybody?
I'm starting to think he's got some pictures on somebody that keeps him employed. I really do. Well, he wants that Patriots job. He wants that pay. But here's the thing, though. After what he did to the Colts, you know what? I'm just going to say this is karma for friggin' Mark Davis for hiring him in the first damn place.
I feel I wouldn't want to be in your position. I'm in Texas. It's bad enough when the Vikings, especially last year at the Cowboy game, I didn't wear my Vikings stuff for like a week and a half. Not because I'm not proud to be a Vikings fan. I just didn't want to hear it, man.
You know what? Cowboy fans need to just shut the fuck up. They ain't did a damn thing since Cosby was on TV.
Yeah.
They are just Cowboy fans are another fan base that annoys me.
And
the Packers got our damn trophy.
Yeah, and if anybody pushes back on that, you tell them go to NFL.com and look at team championships. It'll have a 1 next to Minnesota because
all you got to do is anybody that knows Google, just friggin' look up Google. My God.
But no,
by the way, also, here's another thing you can tell people. How many rings you got? Guess what? The Vikings got 4 Super Bowl rings. You know why? because the losers get Super Bowl rings also.
They just don't wear them.
They just don't wear them. Well, yeah, they do. I saw Lertzma wears his.
Well, he's like, hey, I'm just here, man.
Yeah, I mean, they do wear them. They do. But the ones that are wearing all four, the one they wear is the 69 one. That one is the one. And plus they're not as gaudy like they are nowadays.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we've got rings. We don't have the trophies. So, I mean, if you're gonna come at it, somebody with a freaking argument, at least know what the hell you're talking about.
I noticed the Lion fans aren't chirping this week.
They need to not say a damn word after the ass beating they took on Sunday. Don't say a damn word. And if they lose to the Raiders, just shut up completely.
Well, we were waiting for the Lions to turn into the Lions. It may maybe starting to happen.
Well, what have we said? The Lions will do lion things.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, did you know this? When the Patriots won that Super Bowl against the Rams, did you know that was Brian Flores' defense?
He was on the defensive staff. I didn't know
he put that game plan together, and Belichick went with it. And who was the quarterback in that Super Bowl? Jared Goff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll tell you what, the last 3 weeks of the season for the Vikings, it could come down to Minnesota and Detroit, those head-to-head games.
Yeah. I think it's going to, because look at the Vikings schedule. They have two teams left on their schedule.
You got a chance now to have counting the two that you won already.
They could run. You could
have a 7-game
4 game.
Yeah, you could have a 7-game winning streak up until your bye.
Yeah, because the Falcons have a winning record. They're 4-3.
Yeah, but they got Desmond Ridder as a quarterback.
Right, but I'm saying, the only other team that has a winning record left on the schedule is Lions.
Yeah, and I've never been a Goff fan.
Yeah, everybody else they play has got a losing record.
Yep. Well, except the Bengals.
No, the Bengals are 3-4.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you don't know which Joe
Burrow's
Burrow's
been hurt, and he hasn't been playing well.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So. Well.
Oh, we hit the 2-hour mark.
We hit the 2-hour mark. Everybody that came on, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you. Feel free to hit us up with suggestions.
That was a good idea at Funeral. We may consider that on the division championships. We may consider that if we don't come up with one better ourselves.
Right. Like we said, there's a lot of history with this team.
Yes.
So you can cut it. You can cut it up 10 ways a Sunday, and you'll always have a subject. And it ties into the current team. It ties in.
And if you haven't watched our other shows, go back and watch our other shows, because our very, very first Vikings Vintage show was the inaugural season, how the Vikings became a franchise, how they were supposed to be in AFL, but George Halas said he wanted a team. He wanted to dominate the Midwest, so that's why he didn't want to have competition in that area. So that's why he pretty much made the Vikings made it impossible for the Vikings to stay in AFL, pretty much.
And the catalyst for that was TV.
Yeah.
And we forgot to bring this up, but we brought it up in the first one. It was the city of Minneapolis that had the rights to an AFL team. Who did Minneapolis sell those rights to? The city of Oakland.
Yeah.
So there you have your Raiders.
It wasn't a special. Minnesota was also the first NFL franchise not to be named after a city.
No, they had to take a special vote.
Yeah.
To call it Minnesota, because everything else all the other teams were named after cities. But yeah, the NFL took a special vote to call it Minnesota. So.
Which is good, because Minnesota Vikings sounds so much better than Minneapolis Vikings.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, we appreciate Bob. You are here every week. I imagine T-Bass is probably really busy because he's always here himself.
Mm-hmm.
Vikings Funeral, I appreciate you, brother, so much for showing up. Norpheus was here earlier. I think he left. Appreciate Norpheus is always here. Viking Gaming is always here. We had Rap in here earlier.
Yep.
Our nephew JJ He was in here. Skull for Life Barber, he was here earlier. We miss Sarah. I'm sure Sarah's busy, or she would be here.
Hopefully, she'll listen to this later.
Yeah, hopefully she'll listen to it later. But we love this Vikings. I think uh, this Vikings community. I think we disagree on Kirk Cousins. We disagree on head coaches sometimes, but as a community, I think we are the most together community of all the other teams. As far as content creators go, I also feel that as well. We don't fight. I mean, Lumbar and Luckovich, they just hit 10,000 followers today. They don't have to promote my show on theirs, but they do. You know, and also Rap, Zoe, Skull North, First and Skull. We don't. They don't have to promote other Viking content creators, but they do. And I don't see that with other. I don't see that with other teams. They're fighting for views, whereas we share the views because we're all big one happy family. So, like I said, I love the community and I appreciate every one of you guys. Like I said, we really want this show to take off because it is not like any other show. We are the only show that talks about the history of the Vikings. All the other Viking shows, they all talk about what's going on right now, which is good because you still need to stay relevant. We actually have a show every 2 weeks. We have it tomorrow night called "The Status of the NFC North." That's a bi-weekly show. We do that on Friday nights. We do that every 2 weeks, so we do have a current show. But this is our main show. We really want this show to take off because I think this show is special. And like I said, there is nothing like it. So, like I said, I appreciate everybody being here. It means more to us than you guys know.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I agree 100%.
So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe on Purple Rain 24/7. Tony doesn't have his own channel, but he uses Purple Rain 24/7 as his channel. And then I started my new channel, Skull TYA Catch 84. The link is down below in the description. I started this YouTube thing not too long ago. I've always wanted to kind of do YouTube for a while, but the people in this community are the reason why I started this channel because they accepted me with open arms. They've taught me the backdoor process of how to do this, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate Tony so much because I am the Reader's Digest version of Vikings history. He's the whole damn Encyclopedia Britannica encyclopedia set. And I know you, Tony, you've said before, family members and friends have told you that you need to do a show like this.
Yeah, I was told for years that I needed to because I know they tell me you know too much history to not put it out there. And I'm like, yeah, that's true.
And there's a lot of people who are forgetting what they knew.
Right. I'm believe it or not, I'm part of a grade of Viking. I'm part of a breed of Viking fans that we're getting older.
Yeah.
So, we remember those years, the Super Bowls and all that. They hurt. That's why, I talk about like this current team. I can't accept mediocrity.
Yeah.
And also as somebody who has played the game, coached the game, watched the game over the years, I can't accept bad football. I hate bad football. And across the board, I'm seeing a lot of bad football. And it's in the pros.
Yeah.
Bad football in the pro. This is like the top echelon of the sport. And it's bad.
Well, it's because it starts from the high school level.
Yeah, and I don't know.
I know when I was in high school, I watch high school football practice now because there's a high school 3 minutes from my house. They're one of the best teams in the area, so I'll go and watch them. Park the car inside the road, watch, and I see how many breaks they get. I see that physical. They probably have a 2-hour practice. Maybe 45 minutes of it is actually
hitting,
contact and hitting.
Yeah, there's
physical work.
any.
Everything else is mental.
Yeah,
for when I played and when you played, it was a total opposite. You would have a 2-hour practice. It'd be 15 minutes,
we're
15, 20
hitting.
minutes going over the plays, doing this,
Yeah.
doing that. And then you would have a full half-hour session, and then you would go get some water.
Yep.
You know, maybe in your case it was even less than that. But when I was in high school, it was you would go get some water, then you would come back, you do another 25, 30-minute session, then you go get some more water.
Oh, we used to have 2
You know?
days.
But yeah, 2-a-days as well.
Yeah,
During the summer before the season started, you'd have 2-a-days. You'd get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. You would practice until noon. You'd get a 2.5-hour break. You'd come back at 3 o'clock and you would go to 5.
Yeah, that was, and you know,
fully pad, not this skins and shells that they do now.
Yeah, and just now it's a softer game.
Yeah,
it is a softer game. You can't. And here's my thing: I'm a defensive guy. You can't even play defense in the NFL. You can't play defense in football.
No, I mean look at the penalty that the Broncos cornerback got. He got suspended 4 games for shoulder-to-shoulder contact.
You know what they did? They reduced it to 2 games. He should have no games.
He should have no games and no fine because it was shoulder-to-shoulder.
Right. He should have no games, but that's how soft the league is. It's just, I'm sorry. If this is a team sport, stop focusing on your quarterbacks as much and the wide receivers. The only ones they're focusing on are wide receivers and quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You know, this
well,
used
because
to be
offense sells is why.
Yeah, you know what that sounds like? It sounds like the NBA.
Yeah.
That sounds like the NBA. And I'm sorry, I don't want to see my football games that are 51-48 every week. Does not impress me. Does not. If I have a defense, I want them to play defense. Let them play defense.
Yeah.
Stop with the damn rules. When a defense looks like when it looks like a team is dominating, stop with the unnecessary flags to give the other offense some momentum.
And another thing, did you ever notice? Well, I know when I played, it maybe happened once a year that a helmet flew off of a player.
Oh God, yeah, once a year, and that's usually from a hit.
Yeah. Now because they don't want to quote unquote be uncomfortable wearing a helmet, so they don't wear them as tight as they used to, which probably also leads why there's more concussions. Because I know when you wear your helmet tight, yeah, you have a chance to get protection, but you have to wear the helmet tight. You can't wear the helmet loose.
No.
I never lost my helmet once. Every time I played, I never lost my helmet. And that's people grabbing my face mask because you played defensive tackle too. I had to wear a visor to keep people from poking my eyes. You know, so they're literally grabbing my face mask, trying to rip my head off my shoulders by grabbing my face mask. My helmet never came off. Nowadays, somebody just does this to a helmet and it goes flying.
Well, here's another thing too. You've got people running this sport that have never played this sport.
RGM.
And they're so scared of concussions.
Yeah.
That the NFL does not want to be sued anymore. That's the whole thing. The NFL is trying to avoid having to pay the older players because they had a class action lawsuit that they won, but they're not getting they're not getting anything. Now you've got a new breed of players. They don't even, half of them just play football because they're good at it. They could care less about the sport.
Yeah, there's a lot of players who are naturally gifted at playing football.
Yeah.
Who don't love it.
And don't love it. It's just a stepping stone for whatever. It's a means to get a whole lot of money real quick and then they can retire.
Robert Smith was one of those.
Yeah, well, Robert also had the bad knees.
Yeah.
He had like 3 major
plus
knee
he was
surgeries.
too smart to play football.
Yeah, he's a brain. Most of these other guys are dumb as a box of rocks.
Yeah, we're dumb. We're not smart.
No.
Why would you want to have 47 car crashes a game?
Well, and plus we were also from that era where we were just like, yeah, I welcome it. I welcome somebody running into me countless times.
Yeah.
You know, it's like at the end of the game, I'm going to be the one that's going to be on top of him, telling him, yeah, who the motherfucker now?
Yeah.
You know, that was just the way.
Look at the scoreboard, bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
And for someone like me who only lost maybe 1 year in the regular season and game, that was all we ever did.
Well, I noticed when I got into semi-pro, I was older.
Yeah.
So when I got into it, there were still some of us old cats, but the younger ones were coming in, but they still had that attitude. And then as I coached them and stuff like that, I had to tell them, you know, there were those that wanted to play, but then there were those that were just like, you know, they were good in high school and they just were hoping to get to the next level. And guess what? Nobody's watching us. So if you're going to do this, you got to love the sport, you know. But yeah, it's just it
was the program, the college, the movie, The Program.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hit him so hard that his family feels it. There may be 4 players in the NFL right now who have that attitude. Harrison Smith used to have it, but I think he got tired of being fined.
I'm just going to be blank. Harrison got neutered.
Yeah.
He got neutered. The last person that had that attitude was Ray Lewis.
Yeah.
And maybe Patrick Willis.
Yeah.
But you haven't. You've got players that are just like.
Appreciate you, Frozen. You're always here as well, buddy.
Hey, Frozen. They don't care. They don't have the same heart. Put it that way. They don't have the heart.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to play nowadays with how physical I was.
I couldn't play.
I'd be half as physical as I was and still be considered physical.
You know what? I couldn't play. First of all, they find me too much damn money, and they suspend me too many games.
I'd be like, here's an open check. You're just
I'm just like, I'm getting. I make one hit and get kicked out.
I don't know if you did this, but my go-to move was I used to take my hands before some offensive linemen got smart when they would play against us, because I wasn't the only one on my defensive line who did this. But we were taught to take our hands underneath the shoulder pads, push the shoulder pads of the offensive lineman up so far that it would hit their neck and it would hit their Adam's apple, and they couldn't breathe. So instead of blocking you, they would go for their neck. You got
up under the chest plate when you get off the line.
I think if you did that today, you'd get fined.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. But yet the offensive lineman can basically grab your shoulder pads, which aren't the size they were when we played,
right,
and sling you around like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, or leave early.
Yeah, you notice the only tackles who aren't leaving early in the whole damn league are Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill.
Well, they don't have to because they're
good.
The best tackle tandem in the league,
right? But I mean,
Monday.
Johnson's moving all the time. Yeah. All the time, and he's getting away with it. Viking Funeral, I agree. Roger Goodell is the problem. He is,
but he makes so much money for the owners; they're not going to get rid of him.
Well, and also now here's another thing too. I just found this out. Roger Goodell now has a person working side by side with him, kind of telling him what to do. The person working side by side with him is somebody who's a higher up with Rock Nation. Rock Nation, yes. Yes. Yeah, it's a woman that works hand in hand with Jay-Z. So that's what I heard.
Well, hell, we were going to end this show, but all the damn regulars are starting to come in.
Shit, yeah. Yeah, I got some odd minutes left on my birthday. Hell.
Oh yeah, I forgot it was your birthday today. Shit.
Yeah, today.
We all need to say. Everybody say happy birthday in the chat for Tony. I even sent you like a birthday thing on Facebook too. Shit.
Yeah, I got a bunch of them I still got to look at, but yeah. So I mean, 57 years. So I'm still here. But you're not getting rid of me that quick.
We would throw punches too, but it was not in the gut.
Oh, the worst punches were in the pile-ups.
Yes.
Those were the worst punches.
That's why when you see, for those of you who didn't play, I'm sure there's people in here who played. But for those of you who didn't play, whenever there's a fumble on the field, if they can't scoop it and run with it, you'll notice that they always go into the fetal position. Well, there's a reason for that. It's not just to cover the ball. It's to cover the balls.
Yeah, there's a reason.
Yeah,
a very good reason. Because contrary to what you might have heard, nobody wears cups anymore.
Yeah.
So you got to protect the family jewels.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we actually had a guy miss We actually had when I was in high school. Luckily, he wasn't a starter, but we had a guy miss 3 weeks because he didn't wear a cup, and somebody squeezed his junk so hard that he was bruised everywhere down there.
It's,
So
you know what,
you
and
can't. We're all men, and we all know that when that area is bruised down there, you can barely function.
yeah. And I heard a story years ago. A lineman got, thank you, Skull for Life. A lineman, literally, he wore a cup. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? He got hit so hard, the cup moved and it pinched. Yeah, and
Because I hate getting pinched when I sit down.
yeah, he
You
came
know,
running off the field. Somebody had to literally reach in his pants and move the cup. It was the most awkward looking thing. I laugh about it now, but
I know women have issues, but they don't understand the minutia of what goes on down there.
oh, they're big. They think it's funny when we get hit down there. They just think that's the most hilarious thing. I'm like, okay, you know what? Laugh all you want.
Yeah.
That shit hurts like a motherfucker. It
I,
does.
I like the there was this YouTube video where they, like how they simulate women going in labor for men.
Hmm.
Well, there was a channel where they did the pain of a man goes through down there when they get kicked, and this woman's like, now I know like why they teach us to kick you guys there when for self defense reasons.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
that's the stop everything button.
Yeah. 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 Oh, you had that happen to you once, Vikings?
Oh man, we're just bringing back some really bad
Oh,
memories for you, Viking funeral,
God.
aren't we? My God, I'm sorry. The
Luckily for
Super
me,
Bowl. No,
I never had that issue because not only did I wear the strap, but I wore tight shorts on top as well. So mine never moved. But there was guys who just wore the jock
Yeah,
with the
there
cup.
was. Yeah, I
And
know.
they kind of had to because they're receivers or running backs. They knew that movement.
Mhm.
But as a defensive as a lineman, you don't need that much movement. So I never had that issue. But
I took that shot on a kickoff return.
I wasn't fast enough to do kick returns.
I did the kick return. I was on special teams for
Yeah.
semi-pro, and I did that once, and dude hit me just right, and he caught me, and I'm just like, oh, you know. But yeah, other than that, I didn't have too many problems. But yeah, we've covered everything tonight.
That was the most painful one we've done so far.
Yeah.
75 one, the year of 1975 is going to be.
That's going to
Just so
really
you guys
hurt.
don't know, if you guys in the chat don't know what 75 is, that is quote unquote the push off, or as everybody else calls it, the Hail Mary.
Yeah.
But it's it's the push off.
Yep. That's the push off. That was the best Viking team they had up until then.
Yeah.
That was the best Viking team. So
Yeah.
So yeah, like we said before, we're open to suggestions, anything, let us know.
Yeah,
hit
we
us
just
up.
talked about not wearing cups.
Yeah. So but this was a painful episode. So
Yes,
there you go.
Just keep on piling on.
Thank you. The pain works. The pain.
Happy birthday, the most painful episode ever.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Oh my God. Yeah. Jeez. Oh my God.
My birthday is before the season starts. Right? Like they might play a preseason game on my birthday, but yeah, But hey, they actually gave you a birthday present Monday. Hopefully they'll you get 2 this week from them.
Yeah. Well, also now it always happens, never fails. After my birthday, we get snow here in the Twin Cities, and they're talking snow on Saturday.
Well, we're going to have a huge drop. We are going to go from 96 today to the high on the 30th being 43.
Oh, cry me a river.
And then it's 43, and then the 31st, I think it's 58, and then it goes back up to the 80s. But,
Yeah, cry me a river. Cry me a river. We're probably not going to see 50 again until what, April for Lucky?
Shorts and T-shirts today when I took my wife to the eye doctor.
Mm,
I actually got a cold brew from Starbucks.
Yeah, we're happy for you. Yeah, we're
I guess
real happy.
I guess Bob already has snow in Boise.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. It's Boise. Boise actually gets more snow than Twin Cities.
So I'll say it because
He'll
I don't
say
get
it.
it that often.
He never gets
Snow.
it.
Snow.
Yeah, he never gets it. He's down
Well,
south.
it snowed 20 when we first moved here. It snowed. I think that was 2019. It snowed, but it was the first time it snowed here since '85. And then 2021 we had that really bad snow where we had rolling blackouts and everything like that.
Are you looking for sympathy?
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. That's it. And in my hometown where I grew up, it hasn't snowed since 1977, and it really wasn't snow because the ground wasn't solid, so it melted.
It never. Yeah, when it's not. When it's
and
not.
it snowed for like 3 minutes, and that's the only time it ever snowed. So I hate. That's the main reason why my parents actually moved from up north because of the snow.
Well, and I'm getting older now, so it's
Yeah.
like I'm starting to feel it.
Yeah.
But I like the change of seasons. But
Well, we get the change of seasons here most of the time. We do get fall weather. Like growing up in South Florida, January and February is pretty much it for cold weather. Every other time of the year it's 90, but the leaves are green. All the trees don't lose their leaves. It stays green.
I can't live in Texas. Too many cowboy fans. I'll catch a case.
Tonight on your local 10 o'clock news.
I'll catch a case. I can't. There's two cities I can't go to. Dallas and Green Bay.
Yeah.
I'm catching a case in either one of those cities.
But I will say that when I did go to the Cowboy game, the last Cowboy game I went to was when the Vikings played them on that Sunday night game and beat them. When Kyle Rudolph got those 2 first quarter touchdowns.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That was I went to that game. They were actually not that bad towards us. I don't know if it was because we all Viking fans are walking out together, because there was a lot of us there.
There was a lot of Viking fans there.
Yeah.
That stadium's been known to be kind of taken over by
it is a
monstrosity teams. Yeah. But it's Jerry Jones. What do you expect? What do you expect? Ugly. He's gotta have this big glamorous place to showcase his subpar talented team. Hell, I mean, all those Dak Prescott interceptions probably look great in those friggin' screens they got up above the stadium.
Yeah, I don't understand how the Cowboys are quote unquote favorites to go to Super Bowl as long as they got Dak Prescott.
Because they're America's team, and it's always that way. Cowboys have been that way since the 70s. It's just by name now. The Cowboys haven't been really relevant in a few years. Yeah, they've had good teams, but I mean, they're just right now they're living off what they were.
Yeah,
that's it. So
I don't know where that's at, Bob.
Oh, Spirit Mountain, I know where that is. Yeah,
is that in Texas?
No, I believe it's here.
Oh, you're there. Okay.
It's here.
Texas has mountains, but they're all on the west side of the state, on the northwest side of the state. There's no mountains where I'm at.
Right. So, like we said before, folks, give us topics. We are open to them. There's a lot of history with this team. I can think of some of it.
Well, like we thought of something. Like we talked about like the stadiums and correlate the stadium talk into how they haven't been a good team since they've moved indoors. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about that was the idea we had. The division champion ones is a good one that Funeral brought up tonight. We did first round picks. That was Sarah's idea. Mm-hmm. The Super Bowl idea was ours. We were planning on doing this one for a while. We just didn't know we were going to fit it in. We thought this would be a good week.
We'll get it out of the way because it'll blend in. It blends in years later on in other conversations too.
Yeah. But we definitely wanted to do our first show as the inaugural season and how they became a franchise. So if you didn't see the first episode, you can go back and watch that. I believe the second episode was front office. Going off of that. And then I think the third episode was the coaches.
Right. Viking Funeral. I'm in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Minneapolis. I'm in the Twin Cities. Although I love Duluth. I really do. But I live in Minneapolis. St. Paul born, so.
Yeah.
And you know what, guys, if there's players you want us to talk about, feel free, put them in there.
Yep.
You know, there's the players' backstories are usually very interesting.
There's not too many boring players we've had in this team's history.
You know, this team has had they've had a lot of characters. They have. This team has had quite a few characters.
We could do a whole, because I was also thinking about doing a whole episode just on the Love Boat thing too.
Yeah, you know what, we should, because I've got some background to that. I got some background to that.
Oh, next week then.
Yeah, we could.
All right. Well, there you go. On-air production meeting. You guys saw our next week's show is going to be the Love Boat.
Next week we're going to talk about the Love Boat. So yeah, John Randall's definitely going to pop up. We're going to talk about the Purple People Eaters too.
Yeah, Purple People. The history of the great wide receivers this team's had.
Yeah,
you know,
there's so much.
We'll definitely
do
position, because, like I said, we did head coaches. We're definitely going to do quarterbacks, which will probably be one of the shorter shows. We probably won't do kickers and punters. We may, on the quarterback show, we may hit on the kickers and punters, because the quarterback history is probably the weakest of all the positions in Vikings history. But no, we'll do the positions and stuff like that. We may do two positions on a show. We may just do one. We don't know yet. But yeah. So next week's show, on air production meeting, you just saw it.
We're going to talk about the Love Boat.
We're going to talk about the Love Boat. The players that were involved, the stuff the media didn't tell you about.
And I know some of it because I'll save it for next week.
Teaser.
Yeah.
Teaser. Well, like we said when we started doing this show, there's going to be some painful moments.
And there'll be some funny ones.
There'll be some good ones too. Hopefully, this year has a happy ending. Only one team ends with a happy ending every year. And it's never been Minnesota. So hopefully that happens sometime this year.
Yeah.
But this
was by far one of our most depressing shows.
Yes.
So next week it'll be livelier because we're going to talk
It'll be a funny show.
It'll be a funny show.
I'll be the host of that, and I will kind of push Tony, but I'm just going to let Tony go next week. So kind of like we do in our post-game show, when Tony gets that attitude, I just let him go. It's going to be like that next week. So, And if you guys have any questions about the Love Boat, I'm sure, we'll take questions from you guys in the chat. You can ask Tony questions about it, and I'm sure he has an answer. And if he doesn't, I can probably do some research of what was covered. Because I know with the much sensational stuff that came out of that story, the media only covered about 25% of what actually happened.
Yeah, there's more to it.
Yeah,
there's more to it. The lead up to it and everything else. It was, that's quite a show on its own.
Well, on that, we'll see everybody next week.
Vikings, let's win this game. Skol Vikings, honor your name. Go get that first down, then get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, fight, fight.